For the record, my name is Benjamin Weber. I'm the District 6 City Councilor, and I'm the Vice Chair of the Boston City Council Committee on Environmental Justice, Resiliency, and Parks. Today is June 6th, 2025, and it is now 10:06 in the morning. This hearing is being recorded. It is also being live streamed at boston.gov/city-council-tv and broadcast on Xfinity Channel 8, RCN Channel 82, and FiOS Channel 964. Written comments may be sent to the committee email at ccc.ep@boston.gov and will be made a part of the record and available to all councilors. Public testimony will be taken at the end of the hearing. Individuals will be called on in the order in which they have signed up and will have 2 minutes to testify. If you're interested in testifying in person, please add your name to the sign-up sheet near the entrance of the chamber. If you are looking to testify virtually, please email our Central Staff Liaison, Ron Cobb, at Ron, that's R-O-N, .cobb, C-O-B-B, at boston.gov for the link, and your name will be added to the list. Today's hearing, which is titled A Hearing to Discuss the Environmental Impact on the Redevelopment of White Stadium, includes 2 dockets, which are docket number 0424, Order for a Hearing to Assess the Environmental Impacts of the Proposed Stadium Redevelopment on Franklin Park, and docket number 0425, Order for a Hearing on the Environmental Preservation of Boston's Historical Parks and Green Spaces. Both matters were sponsored by Councilor Aaron Murphy and were referred to the committee on February 5th, 2025. Today I'm joined by my colleague in order of arrival, Aaron Murphy. I also have letters of absence from Councilor Ed Flynn and Councilor Enrique Pepin. I would like to give my colleague a chance for opening remarks before we hear from the panel. So, Councilor Murphy, if you want to speak, maybe.
Sure. Yeah, thank you.
How about 4 minutes or whatever.
It's just us. So
yeah.
we have all this lecture.
Yes. Yeah.
But we won't hold you for no good reason. But thank you, Chair. Technically, not that it really matters. He's the Vice Chair, and thank you to Ellie and your team. Councilor Gabriela Coletta Zapata, as you know, it's hard to get hearings scheduled, especially when the budget season, and you mentioned this was filed back in February, but with everyone's busy schedule, so they're sharing the chairing to make sure that this could happen, so thank you for that. And the reason I filed these separately, as you know, we've been here in this chamber, we've had conversations about White Stadium, and a lot of times I felt that the conversations were focused on the legal aspect and the relationship between BPS and the city and the soccer team, which were important conversations to have. But I didn't want to lose the environmental impact in that conversation and felt that it would be important, especially as all those legal proceedings, I think, they'll continue to happen, but that it's important that we come back and talk about the environmental impact, which is so important to obviously all of you, the panelists who will be coming up next, and so many of us. But we convened today to discuss the environmental implications of the proposed redevelopment of White Stadium. It's outlined in the 2 dockets that we're discussing today. This project, as we know, is situated in the historic Franklin Park. It carries significant weight, not only in terms of infrastructure, but also in its environmental and community impact. While the initiative aims to revitalize a key athletic facility, it's imperative that we scrutinize the environmental assessment conducted, the proposed mitigation strategies, and the long-term sustainability plans associated with this redevelopment. My focus will be on ensuring that the project aligns with our city's commitment to environmental stewardship, addresses community concerns, and upholds the integrity of all of our public spaces. So that's why the other docket, which I know is a broader conversation about our historical public spaces across the city. Furthermore, we must consider the voices of our residents, particularly those from historically impacted neighborhoods, to ensure that their perspectives are not only heard, but integrated into the decision-making process. Transparency and inclusivity are paramount as we move forward. So looking forward to this conversation today. I know we have a good admin panel to start. And when we get into questions, I will be focusing on, like I said, the community engagement, the environmental impact, and the fiscal responsibilities we have. And as you know, we can plant new trees, but when our old ones go, you just showed me that sad picture of the tree that went down on K Street. Like, it takes generations to grow back canopy, and so a lot of my questions will be about how do we get us back to a place in this neighborhood if we are going to be taking down a significant amount of trees and green space, taking up green space and paving it over. So looking forward to the conversation and thankful for you all to be here.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to check for any of my other colleagues not here.
Yes.
So I'm glad they'll definitely have a chance to speak if they get here. But I'm glad we could have this hearing today. You know, as I know Chair Coletta Zapata has a conflict this morning. I think she is on her way and will probably take over as chair. But the issue was whether, you know, to delay the hearing or not. As the vice chair, you know, I said let's go ahead and let's have this hearing. Glad the administration panel is here. So without further ado, I'm just going to hand it over to you. I just want to introduce the panel. We're joined today by Brian Sweat, who's the Chief Climate Officer for Environment, Energy, and Open Space Cabinet. Sam Valentine, Senior Landscape Architect for the Planning Department, and Jill Zick, Interim Chief Landscape Architect at the Boston Parks and Rec Department. Chief Sweat, you have a presentation and the remote. It's all yours.
Great. Good morning. Thank you very much, Councilor Weber and Councilor Murphy, for this opportunity to present today. We are here to walk through the environmental commitments and park improvements tied to the White Stadium project, a climate-forward reinvestment in Franklin Park and BPS athletics that truly responds to long-standing community needs. Today, while litigation continues in the background, our focus is squarely on the environmental impact and long-term ecological gains associated with this once-in-a-generation investment. Today's presentation focuses on how this renovation delivers long-requested improvements in alignment with the Franklin Park Action Plan, from ecological restoration and canopy renewal to expanded access and year-round public infrastructure. As Councilor Weber mentioned, my colleagues with me today, Sam Valentine and Jill Zick, will be participating as well in both the presentation and the Q&A. This rehabilitation is an opportunity to anchor youth sports citywide, restore underutilized public infrastructure, and give back to Franklin Park. For decades, BPS student athletes have lacked access to safe year-round facilities. Neighbors have been caretakers of the park with a lack of resources, and previous efforts have failed to find the right combination of viable funding, well-aligned partnership, and measurable public benefits. This plan delivers on all three. It's the first time we've had the right legal tools, fiscal backing, and community accountability to move forward. Since 2023, the project team has hosted dozens of community meetings, public hearings, and focus groups. This isn't a project designed in a vacuum. What you see today reflects intense community-driven decisions around design, access, environmental protection, and operational transparency. All relevant city boards and commissions have unanimously approved this plan. This will be a year-round facility that serves both students and park users. It includes strength and conditioning rooms, BPS offices, lockers, restrooms, and multi-purpose space. Public-facing amenities like restrooms and water fountains will be accessible at both ends of the stadium. I'll now turn it over to Jill Zick to talk a bit about how this project completely aligns with our Franklin Park Action Plan.
Good morning. I wanted to take some time this morning to briefly describe the Franklin Park Action Plan, a community-driven vision for the park's future, developed over 3 years.
Sorry, just speak closer to the mic. Yeah,
Sorry.
Pull it over.
Can you hear me? Is that okay?
I think a little closer still.
Right in front of you is better.
Keep it red.
Red.
It's got to be a little closer.
In one of
There you
these
go.
budgets, we're going to upgrade our sound system. Right there.
All right, is that better? Everyone
Great.
can hear me? Great. Thank you. So again, I wanted to take time this morning to briefly describe the Franklin Park Action Plan, a community-driven vision for the park's future, developed over 3 years and released in 2022. This plan was shaped through extensive community engagement and outlines 4 key themes for improving Franklin Park. Activate edges to make park entrances more inviting and connected to nearby neighborhoods with better signage, pathways, and vegetation management. Clarify movement to improve pedestrian and bike circulation through a safe and continuous circuit loop and clear wayfinding. Strengthen magnet destinations to upgrade park infrastructure such as lighting and public bathrooms, and revitalize key spaces like the Overlook and Elma Lewis Playhouse. Unify the park by applying consistent standards of maintenance to improve the ecological health and diversity of the park, as well as better integrate facilities like White Stadium by removing barriers, both physical and programmatic. In support of this plan, Mayor Wu has committed new resources, which include 2 maintenance crews dedicated solely to Franklin Park and hiring a Franklin Park executive director. Like other recent capital projects and upgrades in the park, the White Stadium project was designed to honor community history while being guided by community-informed parks planning initiatives, including the Franklin Park Action Plan, as well as the Urban Forest Plan, as our foundation for improving this beloved public resource. With that, I'll turn it over to Sam to explain how the stadium's project's specific design decisions are grounded in the action plan.
Testing. Thank you, Jill and Chief Sweat, for providing the vision that grounds this project. Counselors, it's great to meet you. I'm Sam Valentine, Senior Landscape Architect with the Boston Planning Department and a certified arborist. In these slides, I'll walk through how this design strengthens environmental health, improves ecological resilience, and aligns with both Article 80 and the Franklin Park Action Plan. This first slide is to orient everyone to both the park and the stadium that sits within it. You can see several key locations marked on this slide, most notably the Playstead, which was designed by Olmsted as the first heart of Franklin Park, and the existing and proposed site of the stadium, which you see on the north end of the Playstead. Significant to note out here is the Loop Road, which has 2 names, confusingly, Pierpont on the north and the west, and Playstead Road on the east. Also worth noting is the Overlook, which is, as I think everyone knows, the historic site of the Elma Lewis Playhouse, as well as to the south, the Franklin Park Zoo. This slide, I just want to say almost all of the following slides are essentially artifacts from prior public meetings we've had. Many are from the public tree meeting that was held in December, and this is from a series of design community meetings that we held over the last year and a half. As Chief Sweat shared, our design has gone through several phases, each shaped by feedback from residents, BPS affiliates, and environmental experts. We've refined this design over multiple stages, consolidating structures, softening edges, reducing paving, and integrating natural contours. The layout now follows the shape of the land, uses softer paving materials, including impervious, and eliminates any disconnected one-off buildings drifting out into the park. Every design choice, from building massing to material selection, was made to make the stadium feel integrated, respectful, and park forward. Zooming in a bit, this plan shows it's essentially a summary of the sustainable site plan. So you can see both east and west. East is on the top of the page, west is on the bottom. The landscape design has been incorporated by both project teams, east and west, to include a large amount of permeable surfaces, unlocking, as discussed in prior meetings, an entire acre of open space that is currently chain link fenced off that will now be accessible to park users. There is also significant activation and opening up along the Playstead edge There are more than 100 preserved trees and improved soil systems for the existing trees' root zones. There is also what can't be seen on this one plan, a total of 500 new trees that will come out of this project that will be planted as a result of this project. And then there also are significant path improvements going beyond the stadium itself, ADA accessibility on several park paths. And then the other thing to note, because flooding has been such a problem on the Playstead, is that this project will mitigate all of its stormwater on site through underground storage. So this, as I said, these are artifacts from the tree meeting. Tree protection, one thing to note here is that before the first construction vehicle was on site, all of the protected and preserved trees were fenced off. We made sure that both teams specified a post-in-ground tree protection system, which is not movable by contractors, and it will remain there for the duration of the project. This next slide is a great summary of all aspects of trees in terms of quantity. So you can see preservation, it was 120 preserved trees, and then total removals broken down by categories, and then total plantings, which we'll focus on in a later slide, which are more than 500 new trees. This slide is very helpful because it incorporates the placards that were actually mounted on the tree, on each tree to be removed a week prior to the public tree meeting per the tree ordinance. You can see the 5 categories that are used here. There are trees that are assessed by a certified arborist as being in poor condition or dead, dying, diseased. To be clear, dead, dying, diseased trees are not protected under the tree ordinance, but for transparency, we've included their quantities here. Additionally, there are invasive species that are noted with another of the red colors, and then there are orange trees or trees growing into fences and walls. At the bottom, you can see the 2 greens. Those are trees that are in, quote, fair or, quote, good condition as assessed by the certified arborist, third-party arborist that did the tree assessments on site. So to give just some images, again, this was very helpful during the public tree meeting. These are some examples under each category. So here you see the invasive and non-native trees, most notably an ailanthus or tree of heaven that after being assessed, something like a 9-inch caliper branch fell off into the park. These trees are self-propagating volunteers. They grow quickly, they have weak wood, and it poses an emerging threat to park users. Trees growing into walls or fences, again, under the category of volunteer trees. None of these are of the original Olmsted design for the park. These trees are, you can see, intermeshed with a chain link fence, which leads to something called included bark, and that ends up causing structural issues as the tree continues to grow. The tree on the right, you can see, which we carefully studied with the teams to preserve, is an oak. It is a native species, but it's grown with essentially half of its critical root zone. So when you see a tree blow over, like happened in South Boston last night, it is often due to a compromised root zone. This tree basically has half of its foundation, the other half being blocked by a frost depth concrete wall. And then those trees that are dead, dying, and diseased, which I've already mentioned. One of the hardest trees for us to decide to remove was the large tree you see on the right here. Unfortunately, it also had a large wound. So that is a wound that is more than 6 feet tall, just to give you scale. And that is a tree that, to be clear, was not removed to make way for the stadium. It was removed out of protection for park users and stadium visitors. And then there are trees in fair and good condition. So one thing I want to point out is that 80% of the tree removals met the categories prior to this slide. So 80% of the trees were removed because they were invasive, they had structural defects, such as growing through fences and walls, or they were dead, dying, diseased. These 30 trees that fall under the fair or good condition, each one was intensely studied by the Planning Department, the Urban Forestry Division, the Parks Department, as well as landscape architects and arborists on both consulting teams. The removal of these trees was not taken lightly. As far as the path forward, the tree canopy and planting approach, this slide, which we don't have time to go into the full detail, but essentially it shows taking the original Olmsted design intent as guided from the action plan and consultation with the authors of the action plan to plant native trees in groupings, embracing the stadium into the park. And then, as promised, this is that slide of the 500 new trees planted. To be clear, there are 60 to 70 trees, canopy trees, that are going to be installed as part of this project, meaning within the limits of the perimeter fence that you can see at White Stadium right now. And then there are roughly 500 more trees that will be fully funded as an agreement of this project for the Parks Department to select and locate within Franklin Park over the next 10 years. So this slide it's an excellent representation of the potential and the promise of this project to deliver climate adaptive species, which I'm happy to answer questions on that if you're not familiar. Climate adaptive species that are native to New England, that are more supportive of the full range of ecology of Franklin Park, including wildlife, and overall will reduce the urban heat island effect for communities surrounding the park as well. So this slide, we've covered a lot of these items. This slide is a summary of the direct reinvestments in Franklin Park. I'm going to cheat and look at my notes for a second here. One of the most notable things here is every ticket sold for a National Women's Soccer League game will deliver $1 directed to Franklin Park. That is an example of a product of the lease negotiations, which ultimately the soccer team consented on. Additionally, there are one thing I am very personally excited about is there will be public restrooms. They will be park facing. They're located in both the northeast and the southwest, so pointed roughly towards the El Parquecito playground, and also pointed towards the Elma Lewis Playhouse in the park. Each of those those are two single-use restrooms. They are open whenever the stadium is open, and they are the cost of their maintenance is fully covered by the soccer team per the lease agreement. Additionally, there are what I would call bulk restrooms that are within the stadium, which obviously will be opened for National Women's Soccer League games as well as BPS games. To talk more specifically about the Article 80 environmental review process, which I know is part of the reason for this hearing, I just want to be clear that the project under Article 80, Section 3 of Large Project Review, which is the standard used by the Planning Department, the White Stadium satisfied all requirements. To be more specific, that includes studies on shadow, daylight, and solar glare, studies on air and water quality, studies on groundwater and geotechnical conditions, studies on flood hazards, wetlands, and solid waste, noise, construction impacts, and rodent control, as well as wildlife habitat and green building standards. And one thing to note here is that both sides, both projects within the project are going to be certifiable under LEED. The west side is aiming for platinum, which is the highest designation under the LEED system, but it is guaranteed to meet gold. And on the east side, which is built by the city, that one will at least be certified at silver level. Another thing that you may have heard us tout about this project, one thing we're very excited is that it will be a net zero carbon stadium, which will be the third net zero carbon stadium in the United States. This is an example, just again from the Article 80 process. These are the shadow studies that were submitted by the proponent and reviewed by the planning department. And finally, sustainability commitments. Can I actually steal yours? Sorry. Thank you. Just so I can see the slide a little better. Sustainability commitments, climate and community. We want to stress that community feedback has shaped every aspect of this project, from the landscape choices to its long-term operations. The project will deliver, as I said, LEED certifiable all-electric facility designed for net zero carbon performance. There will be no on-site parking. All spectators will arrive by electric shuttles, bike, and pedestrian access. There is ongoing funding to implement the Franklin Park Action Plan, as mentioned. Also, as mentioned, 500 new trees, fully funding the Franklin Park's first tree bank. There is expanded green space and new amenities like restrooms and water fountains. Early coordination with the Elma Lewis Playhouse and other park projects. And finally, the public access is expanded from what is currently 40 hours per week to 105 hours per week, 7 days a week.
All right, thank you so much, Sam. So in terms of what's next, because this is obviously a project that is under construction right now. So next, as we move to finalize construction documents, transition from demolition to construction, and continue the community outreach, the White Stadium Neighborhood Council will be stood up later this summer to ensure transparency around operations, transportation, and programming. Engagement will continue throughout the summer. We're committed to, and during years of operations, we're committed to continued collaboration with the council, with community members, and with advocates throughout this implementation. I would note that we'll still take comments on the transportation plan that was posted. That was open for a month. People should still feel free. We're digesting that first tranche of a month of public comments. We want to continue this intense community engagement. So the website is up there, or the email address for continued feedback. And I hope we've been able to make the case here, because I really do feel passionately about this project. This is not only a generational investment in White Stadium. This is the most significant ecological entry investment in Franklin Park in its history, and it's enabled by this project happening. So I am excited that this is becoming an anchor legacy project that moves forward with the Franklin Park Action Plan, makes major investments not only in that edge condition around the White Stadium parcel within Franklin Park, but provides resources and engagement for the entire Franklin Park to begin that journey back to its original vision. So with that, I'm happy to take questions.
Okay, thank you. I just have one question before Councilor Murphy begins. I don't know if it was addressed in there and I just missed it. Do you have anything about the difference in the footprint of the stadium, that the old stadium and the new stadium?
Of the physical structure?
Yeah, correct.
Yeah, so we are happy to follow up with an exhibit, but to describe essentially what happened is the west side of the building is remaining in place, the historic clamshell, which you can actually see it's the last vestige you see on site right now. The stadium is growing slightly to the east, but is tucking back in terms of what is accessible and what is paved, it is tucking back significantly from the south.
Okay. Do you have, like, when you say slightly, what does that mean?
That is the acre of yielded park space, so the chain link fence that's coming down. Okay. In terms of total building coverage, if that's your question.
Yeah. No, I'm just, very big, we're talking about 5 feet, 100 feet.
Oh, okay.
It's hard to imagine an acre.
Yeah. So on the east side of the building, the new facade will be built roughly 40 feet from the existing, from the facade that was removed. Okay. So in other words, the building will feel like it is growing towards Plaisted Road around 40 feet.
Okay, and then along the south, how much?
Along the south,
how much is
a little harder for me to estimate. Do you know what an acre feels like, or not exactly? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, sort of.
I would guess it's around 200 to 300 feet of unlocked
Okay.
open space.
Okay.
Is what that would feel like.
We do have a slide that we could
You
show
did-
you on
you-
this if you want, in the appendix.
Oh, it's in the appendix.
Yeah, slide 42,
I think it just might help frame the discussion, but,
because it's hard to describe of what's, how things are shifting. And again, part of this intent was to make sure we actually had a track, a regulatory track size within the stadium to be able to host the types of events that, were originally intended by White Stadium. So because the field got bigger, the footprint of the stadium got slightly larger.
And if part of your question was about, let's say, pavement and urban heat island effect, to answer that question, we have looked both at the before and the proposed condition very carefully, and we're coming in at almost exactly the same amount of impervious pavement that exists now as is proposed.
Yeah, and to confirm it, and it fully fits within the White Stadium parcel.
Correct.
So this is completely within that parcel.
okay, yeah, thank you. So Councilor Murphy, I'll, 10 minutes?
Maybe less, but
Yeah,
that's
okay.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. I have my prepared questions, but just a few from your presentation. Did I hear correctly that when you surveyed the trees that would have to come down around the construction, 80% of them were in diseased, dying, poor condition, and only 20% were trees that you would not have taken down otherwise?
I'll clarify, but essentially, yes. So 80% of the trees, 79% to be specific, fall under the category of poor, dead, dying, or diseased,
That's a lot.
invasive.
How many trees in
And
the entire Franklin Park then would be considered in that category? Is it comparable? Are there close to 80% of dead, dying trees in the Franklin Park field?
I cannot answer that question.
Was there some, environmental reason why such a large percent of trees in that one space would be dead or dying already?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say, I don't think we have any indication that the situation around White Stadium is demonstrably different than other areas of Franklin Park. What we're seeing in being able to look at this is the opportunity to utilize an urban forestry team that's only been around for a couple of years after decades of honestly waiting for trees to fall was, the urban forestry program before we developed our own team to do this. So we have years of deferred maintenance and action that the team is, catching up on. People are seeing that with their street trees now. But the ability to assess this area concretely all at once identified this, large number of trees that were not in good condition, were invasive, or were, self-propagating in places where they shouldn't have been.
Just seems very high. And I'm not saying you're not telling true numbers, it just seems
Yeah, I mean,
shocking
if I could-
that such a wonderful
Yeah.
historical Franklin Park field that almost all of the trees, right, 80%, that's a good B minus. Most people like a B minus, right? That is most of our trees in Franklin Park are in poor condition. And when I'm there, which I visit often, it seems like most of our trees are in great condition, so it's just surprising.
So, sorry, to be clear, there are three categories that are categorized in that 80%.
Yeah.
So the poor condition is just 35 of those trees. There are not many conditions where, in Franklin Park, where trees are growing into fences, growing into walls. That was another significant number.
Yeah. Right.
And invasives are a
Mostly
problem
not
throughout our
fences.
parks in Boston, and this is an opportunity to actually correct that.
Right. And we're happy to have arborists, we need more to join you, but, and you mentioned the public restrooms. I know it's not directly related to the environmental questions I have, but, so the outward-facing 2 bathroom stalls will only be open when there's games being played?
No. So, yeah, I could have said that more clearly. The stadium will be open as stated 7 days per week, with more than, I forget what the number is, more than 100 hours.
Yeah, 105, I think you said.
And open means open to the public. So as stipulated in the lease,
Unless there's a soccer game where
Exactly.
you need a ticket.
correct.
Correct, because the public can't go into the stadium if you need to purchase a ticket for a
Correct.
soccer game.
That's
Okay.
why they're park-facing restrooms, meaning you do not need a ticket to enter the restrooms. And specifically the one near El Parquecito in the northeast is going to be unlocked whenever the stadium is, whenever the lights are turned on and the water's,
Which will be 7 days a week.
correct.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's good.
Yeah, the restrooms
Because
are
there's
open anytime
nothing
the
more
stadium's open.
maddening than people going up to a restroom and it being locked. So
Exactly.
7 days a week while the facility is open, those public, okay, that's good.
And I just want to add, that's why we, the city, are so excited to have a privately funded property manager to keep those restrooms open, secure, and clean.
Yeah, because that's one of the reasons we don't unlock our bathrooms at work.
Exactly.
Because we don't have staff or we don't allocate funds to properly staff them. You mentioned about the White Stadium Neighborhood Council. Could you just explain, if you do know, how that group was formed and who's on it and how were they chosen?
It's in the process, so they're not individuals chosen just yet. We're formulating the categories. There'll be more in the coming weeks.
Okay, and when we
about
have
that.
the second panel, maybe
But we want to stand that up in, before obviously the stadium is open, because there's a lot of work to engage with them on programming, ahead of this. So our hope is by the end of the summer, beginning of the fall, we're standing this group up.
Awesome, thank you. I'm going to get to my questions. Just one other thing. You mentioned the, generational investment, which I agree, as a former BPS teacher or mom who has spent lots of time at soccer fields, baseball fields, hockey rinks. Our students, and someone since day one, I've been advocating for our students in BPS and across the city to have, world-class facilities to play sports in. But my pushback from the beginning, right, we have a once-in-a-generational investment in the Clarity Pool, which I was a strong advocate for, $35 million, wonderful for that neighborhood, but we didn't partner with anyone private. We found the money to fund it ourselves, and that's why, in this case, it's not that I don't want great things for our kids, it's how did we go about it and who's going to then get the best outcome from it. But that being said, I'll get through some of my questions. So you mentioned this, but I just have a few questions on it. The plan includes the removal of approximately 145 trees around the stadium, and there's the proposed $3 million tree bank fund, and you talked about what is the timeline? Is it a decade to ensure that we will plant new trees? But how are we ensuring that these plantings will adequately replace the mature canopy being lost, and what measures are in place to guarantee the survival and maintenance of these trees, especially now that we find out that a large percentage of them do end up being dead or in a place where they may fall over or need to be removed?
So first I'll explain our methodology on how we settled on the number of 500 trees. So different municipalities across the country, throughout the world, have different requirements for tree mitigation. Boston, unfortunately, does not have a requirement for tree mitigation, but because of the importance of this project and its centrality within the park, we created our own mitigation requirement for ourselves, essentially. Some municipalities have what's called a 1-to-1 replacement, which means you cut down one tree, regardless of size, you plant one new tree. A new tree cannot really realistically be planted at over what's called 8-inch caliper, which would be something like this. Obviously, a tree that could come down could be immense. We did not use that system. We used a system that's called caliper inch to caliper inch replacement, which is, in my opinion, as an arborist, more of a gold standard. What it does is it accounts for, if you're removing, let's say, a 30-inch tree, you have to plant 10 3-inch trees.
You can't go find a 30-inch tree
Exactly.
that can, so you
Exactly.
have to match the amount.
And that number is much more realistic. It's used by campuses across the country, including Georgia Tech. It is used as a standard because it starts immediately from the moment the plant goes in, the tree goes in, to start to have those ecological benefits such as shade or evapotranspiration, et cetera. So that's the number we used. We calculated the total removals by caliper inch, and that landed us on what eventually became the $3 million number for 500 new trees. In terms of when they're planted, that is something we, as part of this project management team, we wanted to make sure the money was there for parks, but we also wanted to respect the Parks Department's own priorities for capital improvements and planting. The number we agreed on was 10 years from this project's start until all trees are in the ground. But speaking with the Urban Forestry Division about the realities of how quickly they can plant things. There was no way we could promise faster than 10 years.
And are we guaranteed that these trees and this money funded for trees won't end up going somewhere else, even though there may be a need somewhere else, that we will make sure that these trees stay here?
Yeah, and I should say the soccer team had zero input on the stipulations of how that money is used. It's entirely decided between Parks Department, specifically Urban Forestry Division, and the Planning Department.
I'll have Jill come in a bit on how we select these, but the part that gets us excited is these are 500 intentionally chosen trees in terms of species, intentional locations in terms of spread out throughout the park in places we need them, and then cared for until they're mature, and able to sustain themselves on their own. So this is the largest intentional tree planting in the park since the park originally opened. I don't know if you want to talk about how we think about where we put those trees going forward. And the 10 years is because we
That's
can't
how long
do
we'll
that
take.
volume carefully over a certain short period of time.
Yeah, I think I would just want to add that the idea of a tree bank, I think, is really important because it does a couple of different things. It allows us to select trees over time that are more climate resilient. We obviously have a changing climate, temperatures are rising, and we want to make sure that we're selecting trees that are sustainable over the long term. It also introduces an opportunity to have kind of different start points for trees to start growing. So as we're removing trees that are kind of naturally dying off or identified as poor condition, we're able to replace those. And then we have a variety of kind of maturity of our canopy. So it's not all of the same age. So there's a benefit of spreading that tree planting out over time, in addition to the obvious capacity of our urban forestry staff to be able to physically contract all of that work out. And then finally, I think it's really important to make sure that we're thinking about this notion of making sure that, sorry, I just lost my train of thought. Let me get back
No
to
worries,
that.
yeah.
I can actually just add one thing that I should have made clear, which is the $3 million or the 500 trees. The 500 trees are we're saying 500 because we're assuming 3 to 3.5 inch caliper, which is the most successful size for planting in terms of surviving that, the shock of transplant. But also I want to be clear that that dollar amount includes the first 2 years, the standard warranty, which includes watering, pruning, and replacement for those first 2 years. So that is all bundled in that.
First 2 years of each planting?
Exactly,
So
exactly.
we will go 12 years out, because if the last trees are planted in the
Yeah, yeah.
10th year, that will continue, okay.
Yeah, to be clear,
Okay.
that's how we do our street tree plantings as well.
Okay.
Every street tree has a 2-year warranty.
2-year warranty, when it goes in. So one other environmental question, the potential impacts on local wildlife, soil composition, and water drainage has comprehensive environmental impact assessment. The EIA was conducted, and I think you talked about the drainage piece of it. What were the key findings, and how are they being addressed in this redevelopment plan?
Sorry, your question had many parts. In terms of wildlife, to my knowledge, there was no formal or scientific study conducted as part of this project. To answer that question, I think the best thing I can offer is the tree planting and also some other exciting plantings, including a meadow planting. Meadows are not typically within the capacity of maintenance within the Parks Department, but within the trust parcel. With this elevated level of maintenance coming from private dollars, we're actually going to be essentially pioneering a meadow planting within Franklin Park, which is something that actually originated within the action plan. Meadows, as I'm sure you are aware, are great habitat for
Bunnies?
Yeah, bunnies and birds, et cetera. So we don't have a scientific answer necessarily, but between the tree planting and the meadow planting, this absolutely increases wildlife habitat as part of the project.
And so the water drainage, obviously there'll be more cement paved, but can you discuss what I'm envisioning as a huge space of cement, beer gardens, tents to sell sweatshirts, cotton candy. I don't know what people buy at
Yeah.
soccer game, but
Yeah, so to clarify, if you're familiar with let's say the existing condition out there, on the east side, there's a large basketball court that was actually also built as a parking lot. If you look at it, you can even see like the parking spaces.
lines, yeah.
So that is a major removal of paving. While we are rebuilding, reconstructing the basketball courts near their current location within the project site, all of that essentially extra parking buffer zone is being removed. We're working, specifically with the landscape architects on both sides to scrutinize at this moment every single square inch of paving. If there is not let's say a code requirement need for it, or if it doesn't feel that it supports the action plan and the Olmsted design, we are removing that paving. Okay. In terms of the hydrology of the site, how the water is moving across the site and towards the playstead, we're intercepting through a variety of catch basins, area drains and slot drains. We're intercepting that stormwater and putting it into underground chambers, which you may be familiar, they're used all over the city. Yeah. The idea is to intercept that water before it reaches the playstead to reduce flooding on the playstead.
okay.
Yeah, so I think in summary, this is a very intentional investment in stormwater management that has not existed in this area before. And so we fully expect the playstead and the areas just south to be more usable after rain events because of the storage infrastructure we're able to put in.
That is good to hear. Because as you know, like baseball games, soccer games are canceled often.
Especially
Will
this
this
spring.
make sure that the professional soccer games won't be canceled if it rains? Was that the intent for this investment?
The program of the professional soccer games really does not in any way rely on or impact the playstead, meaning
Right, 'cause
the
that's separate,
lawn
yeah.
that you see there now.
Okay.
There are connective paths that lead to pedestrian connections or the shuttle locations, but those really wouldn't have flooded one way or another.
But the stormwater infrastructure that's being put in is both inside and outside
It's
of the
both
stadium
sides of it.
boundaries. It's to capture all that water that's hitting the site.
Okay, thank you. And last question for this round is traffic. And the traffic study, I know that originally it was going to be Fields Corner and JFK. Have we landed on no shuttles from Fields Corner? Is that true? And that the shuttles will all be coming out of the JFK Red Line stop? Or do we have a different plan that we've decided on?
So I would, as my expertise is not in transportation, I would really encourage you to check out the transportation plan perhaps you have that's online. To my knowledge, that decision has not been finalized.
We did hear at one of our hearings that Fields Corner was not going to be used. That's why I wasn't sure if you were aware of that it was all then going to be coming from JFK, or they were going to come up with a different, because the Fields Corner neighborhood has been assured that we won't have shuttles coming out of Fields Corner. So
All I can share is the team is digesting the feedback from the month of comments,
Okay.
and will come out shortly
Okay.
in the coming weeks with sort of a response, and then we'll see how the community reacts.
in the thought process, because there are those parking spots in the back entrance of the zoo, and those will still be there, but most people, if they're going and they live in the area, they're not going to be coming off of transit. Like, what extra parking will there be at JFK to leave your car to get on the shuttle? Because there is none now, and I live right near there. And then what happens to the neighborhoods around where when you pull up and you want to park, because you're not going to then drive all the way back to JFK and get on a shuttle, where are the cars going to be left? And has the zoo been part of these conversations about the impact that will probably happen and that they're going to have to enforce? Because along that road there's all the side parking on the zoo too, and I'm assuming people are just going to take those spots, and then there's going to be the need to enforce that people are proving, are you going to the zoo? Are you walking the golf course? Like, where are you going? And if you're using it to then not have to go back to JFK and shuttle in.
All great questions for the transportation plan. We're not leading the transportation plan to the, we're prepared to talk about
Do you
environmental.
have any opinion of the environmental impact of the cars and the parking? Like, I'm
I
not trying to
think
set you
yeah.
up with a question,
Yeah,
but
sure.
because I realize this is, and I wanted to focus on
Yeah.
environmental, knowing it's a big part of it, but just.
Yeah, I think the positives of the transportation commitment so far is electrical shuttles, EV shuttles, and maximizing the use of mass transit to get to a site, minimizing both emissions immediately within the park and then emissions in that last mile transit from where people are coming and going.
And additionally,
that would be best in class.
the provision of on-site bike parking, including event day bike valet, in collaboration with the Blue Bike system. So we're looking at all modes of transportation except driving to the stadium. So overall, environmental, we feel very good about the environmental impact.
Okay, thank you. Thank you all.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Murphy, just a couple questions. I don't, do you have any updates on, there's been an issue with who's doing the construction, and I know we have a contractor, or the city does on our side, but so far there hasn't been a general contractor on the other side. Do you have any updates on that? Because I think...
I do not. We're happy to
Okay,
get back to you with that.
that's fine. I think in terms of like the community and being able to reach out to someone, okay. Do you have any information or about what kind of impact global warming is going to have on the trees specifically in Franklin Park? Or are there any species that are specifically at risk, and what kinds of species?
Yeah.
You touched on it, but
Yeah, I can speak generally. Again, this is not part of a scientific analysis related to this White Stadium project, but we are generally seeing. So I grew up in Georgia, I'll say, and increasingly when I look at, for example, the New York City approved street tree list, I see more hickories that were not historically on the New York City list. And similarly in Boston, you just see this kind of upward march of oak and hickory forest composition because of the increasing temperatures. You see also maples specifically moving increasingly to the north just based on those temperatures. So with that in mind, when we say climate adaptive species, we're specifically specifying more oaks, more hickories, more plants that are going to, by the time of their maturity, still be within their proper USDA cold hardiness zone. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, yeah, I got it. And so in terms of the trees that are going to be planted, is this is being factored into
Exactly.
where those are going?
Okay. There's also intention, Councillor, on, a lot of the street trees and a lot of the parks had sort of a monoculture approach, where that was a design intent. And now when you talk about, being resistant to certain types of blights and certain types of pests, we want to make sure we have a diversity of species that has the flexibility to adapt to changing conditions, so that when there is an issue, it's not wiping out, an entire grove in a park. It's wiping out a couple of specimens.
And I live here, I grew up in New York. Atlanta's trees are like just unbelievable. I lived in Nashville. I was always jealous of Atlanta's. I don't know how they got those trees to grow so big, and I guess we didn't have the chestnut issue. Okay, so for one thing, and it's slightly off, but Murphy Field, is being renovated in JP, next to the Muniz School. And there's, if you go by there's a lot of trucks, and this is just for basically, there's concrete bleacher removal and stuff. Is there any, have you done any analysis for how, and people say, well, this is sort of like the contractors kind of run amok, and sort of putting the maximum amount of equipment in there, and it looks like they're going to build a 30-story building there, not just plant grass and make a baseball infield. So have you done any work to make sure that when we're doing the work on the stadium, that it's an appropriate amount of vehicles, and we're not just giving, we're not just saying to some contractor have at it? And
Yeah, I can speak on that. To be clear, the project right now is nearing the end of the demolition phase under their demolition permit. Again, it's 2 projects, so there's east and west. Both of those have had to attain the construction management plan, CMP, as well as a CALA, a construction access license agreement with the Parks Department. So there are kind of 2 levels of review and agreement that have to happen before the construction trucks or the demolition trucks arrive. So we are now at this moment going through those same 2 steps for the construction phase. I know the whole thing appears to be construction, but it's technically entering construction. That includes some things you may note if you walk around the stadium now, including informational signage, including contact. So if you have a noise complaint or a dust complaint or anything like that, there are numbers to call and emails to reach out to. It also includes on-site flaggers, which was a request of the Parks Department to protect families, children, cyclists from any incidents with large trucks. So when a large truck is entering or leaving their construction perimeter, there's an on-site person with a flag guiding them across the crosswalk. There's also a crosswalk improvement and several other construction enabling work that protects pedestrians as they move around the stadium. I don't know if I answered your question.
No, that helps. It just, I just don't want us to sign off on the construction plan and then, to see, there's literally, I don't know how they got that many trucks in Murphy Field in such a small space. Anyone who's in JP drive by, so, I'm hoping the impact of the construction is going to be, sort of mitigated and watched. In terms of parking, living in Nashville, there's like there's Cumberland River cuts through the middle, and there's a football stadium there. And the worst part is the parking, which is just, it's like half of what should be beautiful, like Riverside. And so one of the things about this project, which, I was worried about initially, and then I heard there was not going to be additional parking. Did you have any conversations or, you aware of, did they ever push for parking at the stadium? Was that ever a part of the conversation, or was it just never broached?
So I can speak for my part. From the moment I entered the project, there has been no request for parking from the team. I can say that is since January of last year. I have heard no response or no request from the team for additional parking. One thing that is worth noting is that there are existing roadways that will essentially have the same use that they currently have. Those are the historic carriageways that wrap the historic place.
Okay, and then just 2 more quick questions. For the electric shuttles and buses, I know that the team had talked about, or our transportation said we were going to be ordering those. Do you have a timeline on, let's say, because so the team is not playing their first season in Franklin Park. So they would be starting, a year and a half from now or something like that. Do you know what the timeline is for getting electric shuttles? Maybe you already have them. Have you had any conversations about that?
Yeah, we do not. We can get back to you on that.
That's transportation. Yeah,
that's
I got it.
transportation,
Okay.
but we can get back.
And in terms of, sorry, I don't remember. Oh, Sarah Freeman, who I don't see here, I think she had asked us a question about for the tree removal, and that technically a lot of that's on the side of that the team is responsible for. Like who's paying for that? Who's managing that part? Like is the team going to be in charge of that, or are we?
The removals that we talk about, the removals have happened. So we can use a past tense there. But
Yeah. So all the removals presented at the public tree meeting, and no others that were not presented. All trees have been removed that are going to be removed, and the best way to answer the question of who's paying for it is it's divided by scope areas. The east and the west are 2 halves of the project, and within each scope area, either the city on the east or the soccer team on the west is responsible for and has paid for their tree removals.
Okay. And did we, even if we're not paying, did we remove the tree? I mean, were we involved in that, or we just left it up to the team to take care of the tree removals?
Do you mean the decisions around tree removals or the
No, the actual work? Did they contract with someone?
Yeah.
Or, okay.
Yeah. They contracted with an arborist that actually works with the Parks Department quite a bit.
Okay. Thank you. And I know there's a lot of people here, and there's another panel. But Councilor Murphy, if you have any follow-ups.
No, just thank you for being here. Looking forward to hearing from the advocates, the community also on their concerns. So hope you can stay to hear from them. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm dismissing this panel. We're going to call up the second panel. Just give me a second. Everyone's from the Emerald Necklace. I have the same list, I think. I just have 4. Okay. That's, yeah. So Karen, is it, Moni Broddick, who's the president of the Emerald Necklace, June Sung Lee with the Emerald Necklace Conservancy, Anita Morrison Mantra from the Emerald Necklace Conservancy, Sonia, thank you, from the Emerald Necklace Conservancy, and
Carolyn Singmaster.
I have Carlin Singmaster.
Are they able to come?
Carlin is able to be here, and Anita is ill. I'd like to have Dr. Broder and Melissa, a couple of Franklin Park defenders with us.
Please, yeah, that's good. Thank you.
Okay. Sure.
Can't say no to
No.
that would be a bad choice on your part.
Ooh, Dr.
All these years on this planet, you can figure out how to get out. Sorry, I'm just trying to add more chairs. Good? Yep. Okay. Okay?
We will have public testimony after this, so not everyone needs to be on the panel. Okay. Yeah,
Should be 6 of us. Yes,
okay.
we're good.
Okay, welcome. I don't, Karen, if you have a presentation or comments.
I'd love to just maybe briefly introduce who's here and say a couple of things at the beginning. My name's Karen Moni Broddick. I'm president of the Emerald Necklace Conservancy. I'm joined by, and around the room, members of the Franklin Park Defenders and a bunch of other folks that have been very concerned about this project. I'm really glad that there's an opportunity to talk about the environmental impact that I believe that the current White Stadium proposal would have. I do just at the beginning want to mention that the demolition has proceeded, but the construction project has not been fully bid, to my knowledge, or fully costed or started. And I do want Boston and all the citizens and the communities and everyone that cares about the park and cares about White Stadium to have the opportunity to really make decisions about what should come next. Because I think there is an opportunity to do a project that I believe would support the Boston Public School students, be less expensive, and more sustainable. And that's what we're here to talk about today. We're here to talk about environmental impact and sustainability. And I'm glad to be joined by these community members. We didn't have all the notice in the world, so I really appreciate folks coming out here. I'll just ask folks that are joining me to introduce themselves. They all come from different aspects of the project.
Sure. Good morning. My name is James Mealy. I'm a resident of the City of Boston and Boston Public Schools, graduate, and a supporter of the Emerald Necklace Conservancy and the Franklin Park Defenders. I also happen to be a landscape architect, and I, for the last 2 years, have been extremely concerned about the proposal to, at first they were saying renovate White Stadium, but if you've been to the site, you see that White Stadium is gone. They're building a new stadium in Franklin Park, and just, especially at this time, for them to completely avoid actually doing following the legal process for environmental reviews and for public lands disposition at a time when public lands are under attack nationally in this country is just absolutely unacceptable for that to happen in the city of Boston.
My name is Sonia Babalia. I'm Chief Impact Officer at the Emerald Necklace Conservancy, and my background is in nonprofits, community engagement, professional sports, government relations, et cetera.
Thank you. Dr. McGuire?
I'm Dr. McGuire. I'm an educator. I've used the park for not only the Boston Public Schools as treasure, but for 50 years I used it for Metco. And I brought the suburban school systems in to see what I consider one of the most beautiful public spaces is part of Emerald Necklace that we have in Massachusetts. I feel very strongly about what it looks like to fly into Boston. You really can't fly over the city in a private, in a commercial plane, you fly to the left to Logan. You can see that beautiful green sward that we call Franklin Park. And not many people who don't use it look out the plane window and look down at that beautiful space. And I hate to see anything that destroys any part of it. I only live 4 blocks from Franklin Park now. And it's a part of my memory system, my daily walks with my dogs. It's where I took probably 140 some of the suburban schools for picnics. It's a part of Boston's history that should not be destroyed, hurt, or damaged in any way that would impact the future use of that park. And I think that's what we hear about. It's not just now, it's what's going to happen after this. What's going to happen to that park? Who's going to use it? Whose children are going to use it? Whose seniors like me will have it in their memory system? That's for you to think about when you hear what we have to say about how we love the park and all that's in it. All that's in it, not just the trees, but everything.
Thank you, Dr. McGuire.
Thank you.
Hello, good morning still, good. My name is June Lee. I'm the Engagement and Policy Manager at the Emerald Necklace Conservancy. My background is in environmental science and ecology, and I hope that I could kind of share more light on just the CO2 and the whole carbon neutral aspect of this project, because I know even though it could be carbon neutral, there's still a lot of indirect CO2 emissions to have a stadium running, because I'm not too sure where a lot of that power is coming from. But however, if you are powering a stadium, that energy is coming from a source, and that emits CO2 emissions. And I know right now, White Stadium isn't being functioned like that, and so that emission from an indirect source isn't really there yet. However, when there's more concerts, or maybe if there are concerts or more games, you do have to think about where are that power source and what additional resources are going to be now allocated towards that. And so hopefully I can kind of speak more on top of that, as well as some of the Boston Health Assessments survey that I know the city of Boston does with partnerships with the state to kind of understand a lot of the health disparities that are happening throughout Boston. And I know a lot of the South Boston neighborhoods, including Dorchester, Mattapan, and Roxbury, have some of the highest levels of asthma since even pre-COVID. And I'm sure it might have gone down, but as more transportation is being proposed, I think it's really important to kind of look at some of those rates of asthma around those neighborhoods. So thank you.
Hi, my name is Melissa Hamill, and I'm going to speak to you on a personal level. I like many of people who live in Boston, came from somewhere else. I grew up in Delaware, and when I was about 6 years old, my family brought me here to Boston. And one of the things I fell in love with Boston and made me want to move here was the green space, the parks, the commitment to the environment. Boston is the city on the hill. We're supposed to be the shining example of about environmental needs. We're supposed to be the ones who care the most about environmental justice. In fact, Massachusetts is one of the few states that has environmental justice impact laws that haven't been necessarily enforced. So I came here to Boston over 40 years ago because of these parks, because of this environment, because I wanted to raise my son here, because I wanted to walk my dogs here, and to see the parks neglected or impacted in these ways, and in negative ways, I have to speak up. I'm all for women's soccer. I'm all for having stadiums, but this is not the place for it. And it's something I'm very passionate about. And the environmental impact will not only impact us, but generations to come. Thank you.
Thank you. If you have a presentation, you can give it, but otherwise, it is helpful just to respond to questions, and I think that'll.
Yeah, I do have a brief presentation,
Yeah.
and I am going to ask if others want to add a little bit more. So I think this conversation today is about environmental review and environmental impacts. And traditionally, environmental review does include transportation. That is a big aspect of this project. And that has been something that has never been fully reconciled, and I think is, in fact, and I'm really sad to say this, really unrealistic. So far, there has been a revised transportation report. It's been revised a few times. It assumes only 10% of people will be coming by rideshare. It makes assumptions about how far people will walk, which I believe are just really unrealistic. So I want to mention a couple of key things. There's been no state-level environmental review of this project. It is a massive project. It is over $200 million, maybe more. We don't know yet. I hear your concerns about the number of trucks and cars that are coming to any project. I would just say brace yourself, because we're talking about pile drivers. We're talking about huge trusses. This building, and I'm sorry you don't have diagrams, and the reason you don't have diagrams is because the Article 80 report that was put together by the city never included the existing and the new in the same document. The Conservancy, we put that together. I can send it to you. The project does take up another 2 acres of footprint. 2 tennis courts are lost. That is part of why the permeable paving number goes down, but then it goes up again because the stadium gets bigger, and that's part of that net change. And the community process, the Franklin Park Action Plan, I actually think is a wonderful plan. I think it got a lot of support from a lot of community members all around the park, and I think that's tremendous. But what I fear and what I've been saying is I think that this project, which is not in line with the principles of the Franklin Park Action Plan, has really caused rifts between the community and the city that I don't believe needed to be there. And again, I still think there's an opportunity to do something better and more focused and less expensive and more sustainable. Because I think a lot of the questions that I heard Councilor Murphy and others ask earlier about the conditions of the trees in the park and the conditions of the stadium is related to the fact that it is very hard in a city to maintain our assets. And I'm a big park nerd. I worked for New York City parks, San Francisco parks, now I'm here. We all struggle. These cities struggle with the ongoing maintenance. And what you're talking about here is building a $200 million stadium or more, because we still don't know. New tariffs just went in place on steel, so maybe it's 300, 400 million, we don't know. But we're talking about asking the Boston Public Schools to maintain that after 10 years, assuming that the team, maybe the team will renew the lease. We know that we all want women's soccer to do well. We'd like it to grow. Probably won't be able to be there. So then we're essentially, as we talk about the environmental impact, we talk about the long-term sustainability of this project, we're essentially saying that now the Boston Public Schools and the City of Boston needs to maintain a steel structure with a steel roof, a massive new facility that can hold 11,000 folks. And the fact is, no state-level environmental review really reviewed what the traffic impacts, what the environmental impacts of this project would be. There was a limited Article 80 review that was a city-focused review, but the cumulative impact of the project and the reality of the transportation patterns was never reviewed. That was something we have detailed, and perhaps, I'd like to think at the beginning of this project, people thought maybe this would be a good thing. I mean, we love soccer, we love sports, but I think today, when you look at this and the reality of what we've got, we think there's still an opportunity to do something better. The Conservancy cost estimated and has provided a detailed proposal for $30 million that many of the community members have appreciated. It could be added to, it could be changed, but it would be focused on the Boston Public Schools and the Conservancy and others. We've talked about our desire to invest in the park and invest in maintenance and invest in a maintenance fund. The Conservancy, and I hear you about the condition of the trees in the park. The Conservancy in the last couple of years has spent over $600,000 on tree pruning in Franklin Park. Those are donated funds, and also runs a public restroom, which I understand the importance of. There was a discussion earlier about the tree impact, the tree meeting, but there were no changes or feedback received in that meeting that resulted in any changes in the trees that were impacted. I'm going to ask a couple of folks to also, add in a couple of comments about other areas of their top concern, but again, there has not been a state-level environmental review, which I think would really let every city councilor know if this transportation plan can really work. Because what you have right now are hundreds of buses coming onto Walnut Street, driving into the park, turning around, unloading, multiple buses in a single minute. And the actual reality of that, I don't believe is sustainable. Would you like to add more?
Bostonians are exceptionally fortunate to have inherited one of the most extensive and well-designed urban public park systems in the world. Our public parks are essential public infrastructure that support the quality of life of the city's residents, and especially those residents who don't have second homes down the Cape or up north and rely on these spaces to get away from the physical and mental stressors of daily life in the city. Boston's public parks are the rightful inheritance of the people of Boston, passed down by generations before us who fought the private interests of their own time to protect these extraordinary spaces and set them aside for public use in perpetuity. They did not set them aside to subsidize the future business schemes of private investors enabled by a complicit city administration. I've tried for years now to understand the administration's reasons for pushing through this egregious proposal to redevelop the northern portion of Franklin Park for the use of a private sports franchise. It's puzzling from a purely logistical perspective, as Karen just spoke to. As many Bostonians will tell you, Franklin Park is not the easiest place to get to, especially if you're coming from outside the city. The transportation plan that the city has put forward is light on detail and heavy on dubious assumptions. Although so far they've said there will not be any new parking within Franklin Park, I find it very hard to believe that the private investors aren't already eyeing the rest of the Playstead, where park visitors currently play softball and fly kites. When their dubious transportation plans fail, how long before the private investors demand that the city provide new parking on the Playstead in order to facilitate their business deal? And what should lead Boston residents to believe that the administration won't acquiesce to these demands? The city also hasn't done any serious analysis to understand the impacts on the surrounding neighborhoods and the rest of the park. It seems to me that they simply do not care how residents and other park users will be affected as long as their private investor friends are happy. And what about the fact that the proposed stadium, even though its size would be blatantly inappropriate for Franklin Park and double the size of the white stadium that they just demolished, would actually be very small for the typical professional soccer stadium? Or the fact that prominent sports economists have pointed out that the 10-year term of the lease that the city has provided to the private investors is extremely short for deals like this and could leave the city with a massive, expensive stadium with no use if the team either fails or is so successful that they need a larger stadium somewhere else. Why would the mayor place such a risk in the hands of the city's taxpayers? These are all the kinds of questions that the city would need to answer if they actually followed the legal process for environmental and public space reviews. And I wonder if the reason they have refused to follow the legal process is simply that they do not have any good answers to these questions. Thank you.
Thank you. I first want to acknowledge the community members who have been very vocal about their support for a fully public, community-focused White Stadium renovation. This includes 29 community organizations representing hundreds of people, including Arbor Way Matters, Authentic Caribbean Foundation, Bay Staters for Creative Wellbeing, the Black Lotus Cooperative, Boston Bengals Pop Warner, the Boston Committee, Coalition for Region-Wide Services Beyond Franklin Park, Corporations, Inc., The Enviro Show, Facts Association Exchange, Friends of Melnia Cass Boulevard, Friends of the Notch Forest, Garden Club of the Back Bay, Garrison Trotter Neighborhood Council, Greater Mattapan Neighborhood Council, Green and Green Realty, Hancock Street Civic Association, Highland Park Neighborhood Coalition, Mattapan Food and Fitness Coalition, Methunion Manor Cooperative Corporation, NAACP Boston Branch, Boston Neighborhood Schools, Inc., the People's Academy, Polonia Auto Sales, Power of Skirts Collective, Roxbury Neighborhood Council, Trees as a Public Good Network, the Trustees Collaborative for Parks and Open Space, and the Urban Biodiversity Project. I too want to speak to the transportation plan and its connection to environmental impact, especially what's not in the updated transportation report. The traffic plan describes game day and BPS athletics, some community scenarios like graduations. We're told that capacity of the new stadium for a game is approximately 11,000, but the largest community event shown in this transportation document is an event like a graduation with approximately 500 to 1,000 attendees. The traffic plan does not describe other events that could take place at White Stadium. There are numerous unknowns and questions about the environmental impact of non-pro soccer and non-BPS events. I personally spent more than half a decade working for a professional sports club and facility where game day, community, and special event operations and the demographics of the visitors for each varied widely. For example, a concert requiring a stage build will also require load in and load out of special equipment, several days of work by production crews, and additional large vehicles. Those who are likely to attend a sports event, even regularly, are not the same as those who might attend a different event, such as a concert. These different events have varied transportation needs that are not currently in the updated transportation proposal.
Thank you, Sonia. Dr. McGuire, what would you like to add? Yes.
I'd like to speak for the children of Boston. Both the Boston Public Schools and the 45 towns that are in Metco have been using Franklin Park since its inception in 1965. I've used it all my life, and I'm 94 now. That park and those trees, some of which have been already cut down, can't be taken lightly as something you can put in and take out like you do a saucer or a pen. It takes years to grow, to support beautiful trees. And when I go by there and I see the demolition that's already been done, it's really tragic. That park is the one place you see when you fly into Boston, you're coming in from the ocean side. You can see that beautiful green open. It's the only place in Boston, if you look out the plane window, you can see that beautiful green sward. It's a signature of this city, the capital of Massachusetts, that we should not take for granted that we can just move it around, take down trees, put up new ones, which take forever to grow. And I live 4 blocks from the park, and my trees are massive. They've been there for hundreds of years, so I'm lucky. I'm surrounded by a green mass. People ask me, do you live in a park? I said, no, I live in Roxbury. But Franklin Park is the only place in this city that in one space you have this beauty. We don't need to destroy it in any way whatsoever. We need to enhance it. We need to listen to the people who use the park, not just the schools, the people who live around there, who drive and walk in that park every day. It's not a show place. It's our place. And I want you to look at it as our place. Boston, the capital of Massachusetts, a shining star up and down the east coast of the United States. You come here, you see Franklin Park. I want us to support Franklin Park as a beauty spot, not as something that can be sort of fooled around with. It's secure, it's there, it's ours. We live there, we love it. We want you to support us. The citizens of Boston, the citizens of Massachusetts who use that park, have used it forever, and hopefully will continue to use it. I wish I could have brought you photographs of hundreds of children from suburban schools who I've brought in for 50 years to the Playstead, to the stadium, to the Scarborough Pond, which you come in on Morton Street side. Take them to picnics. It's just a place for many of us, it's a part of our life. And it doesn't need to be damaged and twiddled with. It needs to be supported in ways that support us. Please.
Thank you.
Do you have more, Jim?
No, I think I've said enough.
Okay, so just in terms of what we're doing here, I would like to get to questions. I mean, we've heard from all the panelists at this point now, some twice. I'd like to give Councilor Murphy a chance to ask questions. I think that'll give you an opportunity to, have a more pointed discussion. So I'm going to hand it over to Councilor Murphy. There's still no one else here, so I'll set the timer at 10 minutes.
No worries. Thank you for your introductions and then your additional information. For me, this panel is important to just hear from you, right? I do have some questions I can ask you, but I did want to hear what you continue to advocate for. And I know from the beginning, you've been part of this process, and you're still uplifting some things, and I just want to highlight some of the things I heard. You mentioned, and it really stuck with me, how, many of the people and the children and the families who use this park don't have Cape houses, right? Don't go to New Hampshire. I often hear, especially as politicians, people tell you, everyone leaves come June, July, August, no one's around. I'm like, I don't know what they're talking about. Lived in this city for 55 years, and my summers growing up, and then my summers as a parent raising my children, were spent on the baseball fields, dropping off at our BCYF summer camps, going to the Franklin Park Zoo in the middle of the summer, going to Castle Island. If we were lucky, we'd be going over to one of our harbor islands. Like, we have a wonderful city, and many of our kids, most of our families and kids aren't leaving. And if they have a 1-week vacation down the Cape, that's what most city workers, most families in the city don't just pick up and leave. They're here, and it's important to remember that we don't just use this city for a few months, and then just leave and enjoy other places. We enjoy staying here because it offers so much. So just thank you for uplifting that. Also, there's always been that concern, that question, like, what more will come, right? Fenway Park is dealing with that now, or they have been for years, like, lots of, right, Gillette Stadium, all these places, you build something big and beautiful, it's going to want to be used, right? If it's high school graduations, I mean, I would assume we'd want every single high school graduation in this space. If concerts end up coming down the road, like, we don't build things to then keep it closed. We build it to use it. So what impact will come down the road, and how much will the community still have a say in that, I think is important. And so these aren't really questioned or expect to have answers, but these are the things that I continue to think about, and what will I have to continue to, kind of monitor as we go through. And the big thing, so from the first panel and now the second, is the traffic. I do believe that that is our next hearing order, right, to really, or some sort of, check-in with the council on where are we with that, and is it really sustainable? And if more traffic does come, what do we do? I think it's important that we get a handle on that. And it was brought up earlier that, there's this plan, right? If it succeeds, we'll be there for more than 10 years. If it doesn't, but that BPS will continue to maintain it. So, I mean, we saw what happened when BPS is maintaining it now. Like, how do we make sure that we are able to and in a place to commit to that is important. But one thing that maybe some of you can touch on, and I know it's come up from the beginning, the two things for me is the equity and inclusion, but also the community process. And I've seen that slide, and I know that meetings happened, hearings happened, Zooms happened, but from the beginning I was hearing from many of you directly, but other groups, you listed all the different groups involved here, feeling as though the process may have been happening, but was there an opportunity to really be heard? And if you were heard, did those concerns or your opinions get translated into any part of the process going forward? So the concerns around adequacy of engagement, limited opportunities for genuine input, and a feeling of restrictive public meetings. So obviously I'm not asking the question to the city, and they have shared, but if anyone wants to just speak about those feelings so that we, as and those listening in, can understand why you feel as though you weren't really listened to.
I'll ask Melissa to speak to that, and I'll add something. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, hi. That's exactly what I wanted to talk about. I was involved with the Franklin Park Action Plan from the very beginning. I went to all the meetings, and it was a really wonderful process. And I really thank the city, and especially the Parks Department, for having an inclusive conversation about what we wanted to see happen in Franklin Park. We had, breakout rooms where we talked about bike lanes and about the possibility of dog parks, which is a personal passion of mine. And we were even talking about dog park specifically at the location of where the beer garden is going to be now placed. So it hurts a little bit on a personal level. But anyway, but besides that, the Franklin Park Action Plan was very constructive. It was very community-oriented. And then it went silent. And it took almost a year, and then people were asking, what's happening with the action plan? What's happening with the action plan? The next thing we know, the city's making this wonderful announcement, this ecstatic plan to have a private partnership with the professional sports team and to rebuild White Stadium. And I was even told by somebody on the Franklin Park Coalition that to not even think about having a dog park anywhere near White Stadium because a professional sports team was coming in. I was told that specifically, and that was before the announcement, which kind of shocked me. So I went to the meetings for the White Stadium, and it was really lacking in the basic question. What does the community and the school children of Boston, what do we want? Instead, we were said, this is the plan. You can, talk about the little design details, but really the essential design, the essential plan was going to have this partnership. And there was no question about it. There was no alternative given. There was no other input. So the essential question of what does the community, what do the school children need, that was just brushed over. So it was a very frustrating process because people were having more and more questions about the details, but also about the need to have a professional partnership. So it was mostly Zoom meetings, almost all Zoom meetings. Only one in-person community meeting was held at the Trotter School, and that was it. And when and at least at the Trotter School, they listened, and we had a chance to talk up. It was packed, and people were passionate, and they showed their passion. On Zoom, we were basically given a PowerPoint presentation for the first 3/4 of the meeting, and then the remainder of the meeting was limited to 2 minutes per person to make a comment or to ask a question. And one of the times I was on a Zoom call, and it was about transportation in particular, and I live in the Walkshed area, which would require me to have a resident permit parking, and I would get one guest pass. So for game days, which are mostly on Saturdays during the best days of the summer, I was going to get one guest pass. So I thought to myself, let's see, what if I had a birthday party or a graduation party or just a barbecue, and I wanted to invite some friends, and they wanted to drive from Somerville or they wanted to come in from the suburbs to visit me. I got one guest pass. When I asked the city, what do I do if I want to have this? They just told me, simply go down to City Hall and apply for a block party permit. I live on La Martine Street. I asked them, so you're saying you're going to allow me to shut down La Martine Street for a party? No. So that's the kind of community engagement. That's just one example of a disregard for people's concerns. And it's shameful. People live in this community. We want to be able to have our friends over. We want to have birthday parties for our children. We want to have graduation parties. And to just be dismissed like that was really lacking in true community engagement or concern for their constituents.
Is your concern that on game days, all of the parking around your houses will be taken?
Yes.
That's okay. Just making sure that was.
Yes. And they can't enforce all those streets. And if they do, then what, my friends are going to get towed? So it's just, it's a disaster. And it will impact the environment. People aren't going to drive from Newton all the way over to JFK and park their cars and take a shuttle in.
Well, there's nowhere to park it, Jim.
Yeah, or wherever their auxiliary parking is, which we haven't been given a straight answer about. I've heard Braintree. I mean, really? It's not workable, it's not sustainable, and you know what human nature is. People are going to try to drive in and park their car. And if they get a $100 ticket, they get a $100 ticket. They're not going to care. It's cheaper than parking and shuttling their kids back and forth. So anyway, so that's just my comments.
Thank you.
Can I make a comment about this park? It's not just daytime. I use that park in the evening. I got the street lights there. When I first married my husband and moved there in '65, there were no street lights. You couldn't go there. I go there at nighttime. I walk all around the whole stadium with my dogs at nighttime, up until 10 and 11 o'clock at night. I have never been bothered at nighttime. I was attacked in the daytime when I can't use my hand anymore, but that's my park and I'm going to go there. But you can use that park 24/7, 365. Don't think of it as just something when the sun is up, because people use that park at night, and I'm not talking about lovers. No, that's another whole issue, because I live in the neighborhood. Franklin Park is used by people after work, and a lot of people don't know that. You can go there with street lights all around everywhere, bright street lights that weren't there 40 and 50 years ago. They're there now, and people come and use that park in the evening after work. And in the wintertime, that means dark, but it's safe. And I don't want people to think of Franklin Park as some place which is only open when the sun is up, because that's not true. I'm 4 blocks from here, and I can go there anytime and feel safe. That's my park.
Thank you, Dr.
Thank you for
McGuire.
your advocacy with the lights. It's
Oh, yeah,
important. Yeah, no, because
the
that
lights
makes
are
a
there.
huge difference for people to feel safe.
And they're on. Those lights go on as soon as it gets dusk. The lights automatically come on, and they're on all night long until the sun rises up. So if you want to walk in Franklin Park at 2 a.m. in the morning, which some people do, you can do it. But it is available 24/7, 365, not just 9 to 5.
Thank you.
Could I just wanted to add, I think one of the key things that we heard is that, the Franklin Park, folks have said that this is in line with the Franklin Park Action Plan, and I respectfully say that I don't believe that it is, or Olmsted's vision. Olmsted talked about, he wanted school kids. He said it was really important that this area was used by school kids. He talked about this explicitly not being for professional sports. He talked about alcohol and tobacco and other things that he believed would come along with professional sports. He talked about this being for kids. So that is what's in the books. Also, the Franklin Park Action Plan talked about investing in the existing facilities for the existing community. And I think your point's really well taken. I think this is the community space for folks that live around the park. And we know from national research that folks of lower means need parks close to home. They're not traveling, they're not taking trips. These are the parks that people need. And we have something really special in Boston. There's a lot of parks that have already been turned into these massive regional Disney-fied spaces. But we have, and unfortunately, Franklin Park has not been invested in the way it needs to be. And the Franklin Park Action Plan laid out a plan for us to do that. It talked about needing to invest potentially $150 million into a variety of things. The Elma Lewis Playhouse, the Playstead, the pathways, the lighting. And that's all work that we want to do together to invest and support the existing community. One thing that was really bizarre that I heard during the process was the hope that more people would come and discover Franklin Park and come and use Franklin Park. When we all know Franklin Park is very used, very loved by the existing communities. There's no, I don't think any desperate need or a goal of the plan to have it become a regional draw. I think it is famous. I think people should love it. I think people should worship the fact that Boston has this amazing system, but I don't believe that it means that we need to have a professional sports and those sorts of things. And I want to go back to what you were asking about the community process. There was a time in this country when where plans were top down, right? Where communities were told what happened. But we added things to our laws. We invented environmental review. We have state level environmental review that gets triggered when state roads are used, when there's more than 3,000 cars being added, when a major historic resource is being impacted. And I believe that there are several things in this plan that would require that. And what's really amazing about state environmental review, which no one likes doing these reports, but is it develops alternatives. And the community has the opportunity to look at alternatives, and that's not what we had here. The same happens if we use the Public Land Protection Act. And we have an opportunity, I think there still is an opportunity to do something better for this site. I think everyone would like to see professional women's soccer in the Boston area, and we also would like to see a public renovation of White Stadium. And there's no question now, White Stadium will be renovated. It has been demoed. The new plan has not been bid. We do not know how much it will cost. But I think the question is, are we going to build for $50 million or less a facility for the Boston Public Schools that can be maintained and loved by all of us and the community? Or are we going to build a $200 to $300 to $400 million facility that is probably not the right path for us long term?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Murphy. We have been joined by the chair, Councilor Coletta Zapata. I had a couple questions first, and then I'll hand it off to you. I think, June, I think you mentioned the zero emission, because we heard how the stadium's going to be zero emission, but can you just talk a little bit more about that? And no? Is that
I was going to say, I don't actually know that we know that it's net zero.
Okay.
We have heard that, though we find it hard to believe that demolishing all of the stadium, taking down 140 trees and whatever would be net zero. We appreciate that goal, but we actually can't understand how it works.
Well, I thought that meant that the stadium, when it's operational, would be net zero, not that, I mean, you know, not
Well,
that
that's
the demolition
LEED,
process.
so LEED standards
but-
actually put all of the demolition, all of the impacts of a project together.
Okay.
So I think you're right. It's a good question. I mean, like, what's the environmental footprint of this project in toto? But maybe you're just
Yeah.
thinking about
No,
the day
I
it
was just
opens.
asking about, like, as planned. Yeah, I thought what I heard was it's not actually going to be zero emission. And if that's the reason, that's fine. I just didn't know if there was something that they're not doing that you wanted to highlight in that design phase. that
I'm happy to
would
have
help.
June answer, but it's hard for us because we don't really know what goes
Okay.
into it.
That's fine. I was curious if there's nothing to add. You spoke about it.
Yeah, no, of course. I mean, I brought it up because I know it was mentioned that I know with the Birdo review and all the city is doing, they're trying to really make building emissions carbon zero, essentially. However, if, you know, that's great that this building is going to be carbon neutral, but where is that power source coming from? Because yes, it might not be a direct CO2 emission from the building,
Well, yeah, I think
but
that.
when
I
you
mean,
think about the environmental impacts, it's like right now the White Stadium, Franklin Park, is not being powered in that kind of capacity. And so when you think about, you know, if it's going to be all electric, where is that electricity source coming from, and how much emission is that indirectly impacting the air quality that the Boston residents are kind of enduring?
yeah, I hear you. I know if Dr. McGuire had something to add to that.
I would bring in buses from 33 towns. That's at least, there's two high schools in Newton, plus the Boston Public Schools. We bring the kids in there for programs that are inter-district. The METCO program takes in 33 towns to 44, if you include Springfield, which I don't. They use the park in the daytime in a metropolitan way. It's not just Boston. These are Boston kids, and they're under the Racial Imbalance Act. But they come into White Stadium with all these buses, and they park all around there. And I never thought about the emissions from all these buses and what that would add to. I'll be quite frank, I never thought. I just thought of spaces to park and the behavior of the children once they got in there, and people keeping it orderly, because it's all these different mostly the high school kids. But
Okay. And so, I mean,
that's in the daytime.
Yeah.
I don't use the kids in the nighttime. I just walk there because I live
It's
there.
likely not 11,000 students, but it's a
No,
lot.
there are in METCO.
No, but not all there at one day.
well,
High schools, the
Yeah.
13, the high schools come. I don't bring the little kids in the daytime. I bring only, because you have to have permission from parents and letters and all. So I bring the high school kids in. I don't do it anymore. They do it now. I mean, it's traditional. But the park is not just Boston, it's metropolitan Boston. And I don't think people realize how many years. It's been 65 when we started METCO. We've been bringing kids into that park.
And if I could add just
Yeah.
one more thing, it's like, I mean, I would love to just address this as a question, is like, how does this project overall improve the air quality? Just because, yes, there's, I would say one pro is the carbon neutral aspect of it all, but then what else is
Yeah.
improving the air quality around Franklin Park? I mean, we already had 145 trees. Regarding what category it is, it does still have an environmental impact on how the ecosystem is kind of working around that. And so I think that's my overall concern, is where you see a lot of asthma rates still increasing in the southern part of Boston, and you have all of these indirect pollutions coming in. That's like the environmental impact that I'm concerned about, because we're so focused on bringing carbon neutral buildings. However, what about all the other important carbon, what's it called, carbon sinks? Because this construction definitely brought up a lot of CO2 from the ground. There's a lot of science behind that, where CO2 does sink into natural spaces, but then when you start digging up all these microbiomes, you are releasing stuff back into the air. And then without the trees, again, what is the survivalship of those trees?
Yeah.
Who's maintaining it? Is it BPS? Is it BPS in partnership with the Parks Department? Whose budget is this coming out of? And so these are just a lot of questions that haven't really been answered yet, and I'm hoping that now that this women's soccer team is playing at Gillette Stadium for the first year, what are the changes? Because if this is the path that we're continuing down, it still doesn't make sense to kind of continue down that path when there's so many changes continuously happening. If Gillette is a possibility, how come that wasn't something that was brought up in the first place when the soccer league was like, no, we cannot, there's no alternatives. We have to play in Franklin Park by March 2026. But that, of course, changed. And so I'll just leave it at that.
I hear you. Let's just to keep a focus on the environmental impact of the project. So one thing that I thought helped in the transportation plan in terms of environment was on Walnut, on the west side of the park, they were going to close off the street to traffic on game days, and that even when they're running shuttles, there'll be less traffic on that street on game days, so in terms of the environmental impact, even if they were using the regular gas buses or diesel, they were going to have fewer, but now we have more time to get the electric buses in place. Am I missing something there?
Well, you have to kind of think about where now that new traffic is going to be relocated, because that's where a lot of people went to get around that neighborhood. But then when you start relocating that traffic pattern, you're bringing that into a different neighborhood. And then again, with the walk shed parking, I also live in Eggleston Square.
Oh, June, you can talk into the mic.
I also live in Eggleston Square, which I know right now the walk shed parking permit is requiring people to not be able to park 3 hours before the game and then 1 hour after the game. And so what do those renters or homeowners do for those couple hours? Do they drive around to a different place in a neighborhood? And so it would be good to know what is the real comprehensive plan to really help residents of Boston navigate and have an understanding, why is this change happening when it's not needed in their residential, streets.
Mm-hmm. It's already, I'm sure you've driven between Eggleston and Forest Hills. It takes, some days it takes like an hour to get down just a few blocks. And just imagine increased traffic from people coming looking for parking spots and buses and all this other congestion that's going to happen. It's going to push into the Eggleston and all these side streets. And not only that, the businesses are going to be impacted. People who rely on someone to just be able to pull up and get their hair done at the local hair salon, they're not going to be able to do that anymore. This is having a huge impact on our community. And it hasn't been well thought, it hasn't been well designed, and I don't see it ever being designed well enough to be able to sustain all the needs of a very congested urban neighborhood.
Okay, and I just, in terms of our thinking and the impacts, when you're talking about traffic, Melissa, and, parking, we're talking about mostly game days for the women's team, which are at home. I think there's 15 teams in the league, so we're talking about 15 to 20 evenings, most likely, during the year. Are you talking about other times? That's what
let me just mention, yes, I think right now the lease and the documents so far talk about 20 game days and practices, I believe, which are Saturdays or other days during the summer, which are important to the community. So we're talking about displacement and a realignment of people's patterns, like you mentioned, closure of Walnut Street, which is a street that I think most people don't think of 400 buses coming down. But there's nothing that prevents the city or the lessee to have concerts, other big events on a more frequent or regular basis during the course of the lease or in the future. And it makes sense. Cities have to make money. You build a $200 or $300 million stadium that you need to maintain. You have to pay debt service on those bonds, which is how this would be paid for. So again, this did not have a state-level environmental review, and it doesn't run the numbers in such a way that you can really properly evaluate the traffic impact of this. But what I think you're hearing from the public and others is these roads are already congested, unfortunately, already busy, and you're introducing at least 20 days, like you talk about, and very likely more.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm gonna pass it off to my colleague and the committee chair. While I have you here, Emerald Necklace. From your window, you can see Jamaica Pond. I know we've heard from advocates, Dan Moon, who I think is working on the lawsuit, and Tony Dreyfus and Jerry Wright, that we really, need help at the pond in terms of, we got a huge investment through Matt O'Malley's hard work, and it's sort of been languishing. So, I really hope we can work together on that as we go forward, and I'd really love to see Emerald Necklace out there, helping us make the case for helping Jamaica Pond. And so that just a pitch. Okay.
Yes, we've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars and many, many hours of volunteers cleaning up Jamaica Pond, and it is too bad. $5 million was put in by the city of Boston, doing an amazing job on the pathways, and they have fallen into disrepair already.
Yeah.
You're right.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay, Councilor Coletta Zapata.
Thank you so much, Vice Chair, and I just want to express my deepest sorries that I had to miss this. We had the Mayor's Coffee Hour in East Boston that was scheduled at the exact same time, even after we had put this on the calendar. So I'm so sorry that I couldn't be here to listen to the full testimony, but I know we have a venerable Vice Chair here with Councilor Weber, and is doing an incredible job for his community. So thank you for your work and your advocacy. This may be the first time that I think I've sat in front of all of you. I represent East Boston, Charlestown, the North End, and a little bit of the Wharf District. I'm very proud to be a fourth-generation East Bostonian. My great-great-grandparents benefited from a Frederick Law Olmsted Park that you all probably have never heard of before because it was destroyed because of the airport.
That's right, the airport.
There was a sports
That's right.
facility there. You had access to the water. It was a forested, beautiful environmental treasure. And it was destroyed through eminent domain, where the state came in and completely paved paradise and put up a parking lot, quite literally. And so that is the legacy that I have inherited. My mom brought me to protest against airport runway expansion in the 1990s. There's a photo of me saying no runway 1432. Right. So these are continuous environmental fights that we have. And so that is a lived experience that I bring to this space that anchors my value set. And so I say that almost as like, hey, we all care about environmental injustice. We all care about the environmental impacts that, could arise from even the greatest of intentions. Mm-hmm. Now, that being said, I think I'm one of the only counselors that has spent more time at Playstead Park in my high school years than at home. During the fall time, I played soccer there through Latin Academy, and then in the springtime, I played softball there. And so I spent a lot of time at White Stadium and there, and it's not news to anybody that it does need some love. Mm-hmm. And kids deserve the world. They deserve a world-class facility to help achieve their dreams. And so I don't want to rehash anything that's already been said here in the council or things that have moved forward. We're focusing more on the environmental impacts. And so my understanding is that the administration came, they spoke about it. There's 500 trees that are being planted. It is a fair and valid conversation to be having about the carbon emissions of the cars that may be coming in and trying to understand how to mitigate that, because that is something that we are still dealing with as an environmental justice community in Eastie with the airport. I don't really have any questions, but I've been listening in, and I've been listening to your testimony, but just felt like it was important to talk about my background and say that I'm committed to environmental protections as best as we can, and trying to work together towards a common goal. So thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, so we're going to thank you to the panel, and many of you are my neighbors, so I look forward to seeing you in the community and at future meetings, and probably on the neighborhood council that will be dealing with the impacts of the stadium. So I'm going to, I guess you can, chair to the panel. So we're going to public testimony.
I was wondering if I could just
sure.
respond to, thank you so much for your comments and the experience that you're talking about. I had a similar one with an Olmsted Park in Atlanta that my father was arrested fighting to prevent a highway from going through a park. This story happened all over the country. And it's for precisely those reasons that we have laws like MEPA and Article 97 that give community choice. Would you like this or this? And that's the challenge with what we have here today, is that I don't think the community had a choice about the size or the scale of the project. And I do think that the women's soccer team is going to be playing in Gillette for a year. The costs continue to escalate with the new tariffs. I think there's an opportunity to rebuild the public school stadium that we need for the Boston Public School kids that would be open to them all the time. The field that is proposed would not be available to the Boston Public School students for a lot of the year, and not to the football team, certainly, for most of it. But I do appreciate it. I think everybody here is trying to do the right thing for the environment. I don't think people are trying to do the wrong thing, but I do think that there are unintended consequences with a project of this scale. And I'd love to see if there's a way that we could create a plan that is more tailored to the desires and the choices of the community. And I really appreciate your experience with East Boston. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm just going to, just because we're going to call people up,
Yeah.
I think it's better if the panel clears out, just so we don't have a back and forth with the panel and public testimony folks, and just sort of clear the floor for the people giving public testimony. Thank you very much. You can do it. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Proverbial handoff from Vice Chair to myself. We'll go to public testimony. We'll start with Kate Phelps, James Mealy, Lawrence Hutchinson, Gabrielle Pay, and Renee Welsh, and then we'll go to Zoom testimony. We have a couple folks. You have 2 minutes. If you can just please say your name and affiliated organization. I will be having a timer going, so you'll hear it, and just hopeful that you all can keep within 2 minutes. Thank you so much.
And thank you for holding this hearing. My name is Kate Phelps. I live in Highland Park in Roxbury, and I'm a member of the Highland Park Neighborhood Coalition who supported the Franklin Park Defenders. I truly hope that the councilors here today will take seriously the fact that we have time to change. There is an opportunity now. Yes, you've allowed the destruction of the stadium and the destruction of the trees, and a lot of disappointment and hostility has built up in the communities like ours, where folks are eager to see all the things that Franklin Park has always deserved. But it's a question of political will. Certainly the community for decades has been fighting for its own park. Finally, we have a mayor who comes along and says, I will help you get what you want. And many city councilors who jump on that bandwagon, which is a very powerful bandwagon, and say, yes, we will give the locals around Franklin Park what they want. So undoubtedly, numbers of us were so excited. It was presented to us as, if you want the goodies, you have to have the soccer team. That is not an option. Don't think that by putting us on your committees of community involvement, you're going to assuage any of us. We weren't given the opportunity to discuss on the basic question. But today, Councilor Weber and all of you have the opportunity to say, let's pause. 6 of you already had voted to pause this process, and we're asking pause again before you end up on the wrong side of history. Hitching yourself to an expensive wagon that promises to buy you everything you want, I think we've seen recently, does not bode well. Look what's happened to Donald Trump and Elon Musk. We do not want to have what we need for the city just because somebody else comes along and says they can help us fund it. We can fund this, and the mayor has promised whatever it takes. Well, we want whatever it takes to rebuild a stadium for our students in Boston. We don't want 11,000 people all the time coming to Franklin Park. I can't imagine what that's going to do to all the new saplings they plant to replace all the tree canopy we've had. So councilors, please take us seriously. Don't put us on your community outreach committees to rubber stamp what you want because the mayor's insisted on it. That's wrong.
Thank you so much. Kate Phelps? Oh, that was you? Okay. And James Mealy?
I participated.
Okay. Lawrence Hutchinson? Welcome, Lawrence. Remember to state your name and your affiliation.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Laurie Hutchison. I'm a BPS parent, a BPS teacher, a frequent user of Franklin Park, and I live on Montebello Road in JP. I don't think we should be cutting down 100-year-old trees in our public parks. I'm not convinced by the graphic that tells us otherwise. I'm also not convinced by terms like edge softening, permeable surfaces, and activation of the space. I don't think we should be building massive structures in our parks. Yes, we're taking down an 8-foot chain link fence on one side, but we're also putting up an 80-foot stadium wall. Yeah. Parks are about trees and about open space. I don't think public projects should be allowed to use loopholes to avoid the existing laws for the use of public land. It's too late for the trees involved in this project. Those were cut back in February. But I don't think it's too late to make this project a win for everyone. Let the soccer team find another space more suited to the structure they want to build and the transportation their project requires. For all the numerous public meetings that have been held about this project, there is yet to be any space made to discuss public alternatives. Let's start talking about a plan that puts BPS, the local community, and the park first. It's been a very difficult process, but I like to think of the 93 Expressway project that within the 11th hour became the Southwest Corridor Park. This could be that moment for Franklin Park and for White Stadium. Thank you for hearing me.
Exactly 2 minutes. Thank you. And thank you for your testimony. Gabrielle Pay, and then Renee Welsh, and then Kaliga, sorry.
Hi. I have a few points to make. Many Boston residents don't have the money to go to the Cape or the Berkshires in the summer. Our park is our connection to nature. It's where we go to regenerate, where we go to enjoy nature. It's essential to our mental and physical health. I live in Jamaica Plain, but Dorchester and Roxbury don't have any other large outdoor spaces except for Franklin Park. For most of the events at the stadium, we're footing the bill for this stadium, yet we'll have to pay for the venues, for the beer garden and the events other than the BPS games. We've presented an alternate plan for a fraction of the cost. This money is coming out of the Boston Public School budget, where our schools are falling apart. In addition, I'm very concerned about the, excuse me, Dan Weber, you're my city councilor. I'd like you to listen to me. I voted.
I'm sorry that I asked him a question. My apologies.
Thank you.
That was my fault.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. You represent me. I hope you're, whatever you are deciding is with the interests of the people who voted for you, the people in your community, not people from a Newton soccer stadium team. Thank you. I also want to speak about the Shattuck proposal. When the tiny houses were there, I live very close to the Shattuck. I'm abutting Franklin Park. There were so many drug users. I never felt safe leaving my house after dark. I didn't feel safe going into the park by myself. Because of all the drug use. There's an epidemic of loneliness in this country and this city. You're taking away the safety by trying to put an enormous drug treatment center in Franklin Park and bringing all these people from outside of the city for these games is not supporting we, the people who live in the city of Boston.
20 seconds.
Yeah. So also, if the soccer team isn't successful, we, the taxpayers of Boston, will have to foot the bill for the stadium. And, just the way the federal government is opening up our national parks to mining and logging, you're opening up our park to all these private interests. This is our park, this is our heritage. We want to preserve the beauty of our park. We the people who live in Boston and live in the surrounding communities. Thank you.
Thank you. Renee, Kaliga?
Hi, how are you? Renee Stacy Welch. I am an employee of the Conservancy, but before I was an employee of the Conservancy, I have lived in Jamaica Plain and Roxbury since 1975. It's 50 years. That's longer than some, right? And what I've noticed with this development, and sorry, I'm also the chair for Jamaica Plain Neighborhood Council. And what I've noticed about this development, it has been, with the exception of Councilor Murphy and others that I've met, it has been you who have divided this community with this development. You have put us against each other. You have sided with people. And what you haven't done is come together, brought us together, and worked together. And what I've noticed is that you have created, this administration has created a space where neighbors are being abusive to each other, saying ridiculously hateful things to each other, all about the White Stadium. Because many people who support this are going to make copious amounts of money, whether they have a bike company, they're going for a liquor license for their cafe. You have divided this community in such a way where I'm afraid to walk down the street because somebody always going to say something smart to me. But I think as counselors, it's up to you to bring us together. You haven't done that. And I understand there is a common ground. There is a space where everybody could be happy with this development, but many of you aren't willing to listen to what that is. That said, you now have decided that you wanted to build something in Franklin Park that is going to gentrify a neighborhood of people right? Gentrify a neighborhood that many of us who have been here before, it was fashionable. Many of us who have been here who fought to clean it up, police it, and manage it. You now have decided that black and brown people should not have a voice in this discussion, but you've picked who you want to be part of this discussion, and it is not fair. It is up to you. You serve at the pleasure of the people. Do not serve at the pleasure of others, the pleasure of us. And it's about time that you get down and you start working with us. You haven't done that. You need to also understand that this is not for us. This is not for our black and brown children. This is for people who don't live here, who don't care about here, who's not going to care about our park, who is not going to steward this park. They're going to come in and they're going to decimate our park while they're drinking and vomiting and urinating and whatever else. Please, please talk to us. Don't talk at us. Don't assume that we don't like football. Don't assume that we don't care because we don't have kids. Get involved with us. Find out what's going on and be part of it. And I will say this, many of you who are making these discussions, you are not from here. I grew here. Many of you all flew here. It's about time you listen to the people here to ask us what we want. I'm gonna land my plane. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Renee. Kaliga?
Okay, I don't want to be cut off, and I'm going to tell you why. Because I wear many hats, and I went to so many of those meetings. First of all, Councilor Murphy asked about the process, talked about the process. Before I tell you what hats I wear, I went to so many meetings where we were given 2 minutes, the chat was cut off, whatever. This was presented to the community as a done deal. And I'm going to tell you, the orange felon is in office. I can't say the T name. The orange felon is in office partly because of a not misinformation, disinformation campaign. Do you know what the D is for? Deliberate. And this was presented as the only way to fix White Stadium by the mayor, okay, and City Hall, the only way. We know, because it came out in the media and was squashed within 2 days, that the RFP process was not legally done. This was the only RFP, right? And it was presented as a done deal. Now we'll have community meetings. You have community meetings before to find out what we want. That's community engagement. That's what I want to say about that. So no, it was not a fair process. I was born in Boston. I grew up, Jean's like my aunt, I grew up in Roxbury. I went to White Stadium and Playhouse in the Park growing up. In Roxbury, I lived in the South End, I now live in JP. I have lived in Boston all my life except for 1 year, 2 separate years in Cambridge, but I was always working and in Boston. I have been an RN here for over 47 years. I was a city nurse. I'm a BPS parent, 3 grown, and I have 1 daughter graduating this year. She went to her prom Wednesday. She looked like a princess. And my son is going into his junior year at Tech Boston. He plays soccer. We're a soccer family. My brother was a pro soccer player. I grew up playing soccer because my dad's an immigrant. I've been working since I was 12, paying taxes since I was 14. I'm still paying taxes, and I'm about to be 70 years old. Okay, we adopted. That's why I have 2 kids. I didn't give birth to them. But they're my kids. And I volunteer at the O'Brien School. Boston schools are wonderful, but the facilities are terrible for many of the schools. And at least half the capital budget for BPS schools is going to this vanity project of the mayor's. Are you kidding me? I'm outraged as a BPS parent, and many teachers are. John is a former BPS teacher. Gabriel is. He's a teacher now. And I'm a volunteer. I cannot believe that anybody would even consider this. And you know what? The O'Brien is so vibrant. Most of those kids are of color. And most of them are going to college. I was there working with a young woman who was graduating, a young, tall, beautiful black woman. You know what she's doing? She's going to be an engineer. She's going to Vanderbilt in Tennessee from the O'Brien. Those are our kids. How can we do this to them? I'm going to tell you, this is about environmental, so I'm going to get to that. As a nurse, we talk about health disparities in the communities surrounding Franklin Park, because I'm from the community on the funky side, not the posh side of JP. Okay? The health disparities are not just asthma, which is more prevalent in those communities. It is all lung diseases, all COPDs, as well as sarcoidosis. I've got literature, if you want it, evidence-based research, okay? More sarcoidosis, more lung cancers, all COPDs, right? More autoimmune disease, more types of cancers are prevalent in these communities with poorer outcomes. Poorer outcomes. And parks are physical health. They are for public health. And I didn't say that also, more mental issues in those communities. I wonder why. Yep. But anyway, the point is parks are public health because they clean our air, but they're also where we go to commune with nature, where we go to meet with our families and friends, to celebrate our heritage, right? And to breathe, and to realign ourselves with mental health. So what we are doing is a travesty, okay? We are felling 145 trees, most of them are down, and most of them were old growth, okay? We're taking 2 acres more of green space from the park. For what reason? To have a jumbotron, a beer garden, luxury boxes. We have a plan to fix White Stadium that would save tens of millions of tax dollars, even though they demolished most of it. Even doing it through an alternate plan would save tens of millions, save those 2 acres of green space, right?
Thank you, Kaliga. That's been 5 minutes.
Well, like I said, I wear many
seconds.
hats. I want to say one more thing.
Thank you.
How many years does it take to grow an 80-year-old tree? And those 500 seedlings only go to 1.5 50-year-old trees, by the way. How many years does it take? You're going to say 80 years. It's 4 generations.
Thank you so much. And I just want to acknowledge that we've been joined by Council President Ruth C. Louis-Jean. So if I can have Christine Poff and Sarah Freeman get ready for online testimony. Is John Ball still here? Okay, would you like to testify? You have 2 minutes.
I would.
Thank you so much.
Thank
you so much.
I think we've had enough of that already.
Excellent.
In this
Thank you so much for being here.
Process over the months and years. We have to remember this White Stadium project is just part of really a social engineering project to remake Boston. It's not first of all, just in Franklin Park itself, there's a coordinated attack on the park. What do? There are things people don't want. You do what any self-respecting city does. You put them where the black people live. That's why they want to move Mass and Cass to the Shattuck site. That's why a soccer stadium gets put where it is. You destabilize those communities. Pretty soon, the black homeowners and so that have managed to hang on, they'll end up selling out. Real estate interest will pick them up for pennies on the dollar, and then the new people who move in will have the clout to get those things shut down. We know that. You look 30 years, that's slam dunk, that's what's going to happen. The mayor, they have this Squares and Streets initiative to upzone, build housing. Housing for whom? It's not family housing for the people who live here now. I listened to the vote at was it Rosendale? Squares and Streets? Yeah, it was a unanimous vote. One of the commissioners, talk about public process, he used his entire privileged time to speak to blast. This took 14 months. We can't allow that we have to redesign the whole city and upzone it to these big boxy. The cat's out of the bag. Mayor Wu let the racist agenda right out of the bag. She put the fencing around the White Stadium project on Martin Luther King weekend. That was not a coincidence. That was a message. We put a public plan out, by the way, as Franklin Park defenders for building economically after Mayor Wu said, I'll spend whatever it takes. So she's put $100 million on the table. Well, we said, okay, for $40 million, we can, on February 13th. The next morning, she sent her goons out to knock down those trees. Everybody's talking about all those trees knocked down. That was Valentine's Day massacre. That was done in response to our public presentation the night of February 13th. Public process. We're suing, one of the plaintiffs, because nothing else worked. There's supposed to be safeguards in this city, like the Landmarks Commission, which April 24 passed, wrote a letter unanimously signed by all the commissioners that the city had violated all its process. So of course what Mayor Wu did was what any good mafia don backed by billionaire money would do. She fired the chairman of that commission. Roseanne Foley was her name. She did that very next, within a couple days. I think it was on a Friday afternoon, so it would get buried from the news cycle. Public process, what a joke. There's only, they all talk about there's hundreds. I think Mayor Wu and her city council flunkies, someone said there's been extensive public process of 26,000 meetings. There's been one public meeting ever. It was held at the Trotter on March 25th, 2024. I think 3 people got up first I hate to say it, people that look like me who live near the park said, and they wanted to argue about the color of they wanted mauve or chartreuse bathroom curtains or something. And then everybody else got up and for 2 or 3 hours blasted that the community had been disrespected, and everybody knew why that was being put there, why the park had been neglected, and suddenly it's found that there's room for. At the end of that, it was announced from the podium that there's still so many people in line to speak that we'd better have a follow-up meeting. And that eventually, a few weeks later, we got the follow-up meeting. It was scheduled, get this, it was scheduled for a Friday night at 6:30 on May 3rd. That makes you think that would be enough to make sure there's no public testimony. But just to add insult to injury, 48 hours before that, they switched it to a Zoom hearing. So it's not even public at all. And then, of course, then they did the usual dog and pony show and they even cut off, I think it was Lewis that got cut off when he tried to speak. Tanya Fernandez Anderson, in the last 30 seconds of the meeting, see, she didn't have to face the public, so she said, oh, by the way, I support the project. That's how they do. That's how this city works. The way any mafia don.
Thank you, John. It's been 5 minutes. I'll allow 1 more minute. Thank you so much.
One more thing. So then the mayor and city council, they claim that they're consulting with the public. There's something called the Franklin Park Coalition, which ages ago was actually a coalition because it was made of neighborhood organizations and churches. Now it's whoever shows up and is willing to, I hate to call it, but the world's oldest profession with the city money. They get paid out of the damages from the what's it called, Landmark Trust, the Shadows on the Common thing. We got to hear from them. I went to the first time I've ever bothered to go to one of their meetings. And the guy at the end, I think his name was Bohr, gave his "I have a dream" speech. I have a dream that Buffy and Muffy from the suburbs will arrive and discover Franklin Park. They'll come in on the shuttle and they'll have a picnic over on a hill.
Thank you, John. I want to be respectful of people also waiting to provide testimony online.
I'm sure they will. Okay. I was just picking up for all the time I got shut down, and everybody here has gotten shut down, and you made sure there was no public press. Because I remember public processes. I was no great fan of Tom Menino, but by golly, when he wanted to poison the Phragmites with medicinal glyphosate. We had a public meeting. This is in the Back Bay Fens, which, God, we got a public meeting. And we shut them down. In 1988, they wanted to remake my park. I was living in the Fenway at the time. And they were, oh, let's get rid of the victory gardens and the basketball courts. That was a message about who they wanted in that park. Again, 300 people showed up at a Ray Flynn. You know, Ray Flynn was the mayor then. We had real public meetings. And they said, oh, maybe that isn't the plan you want, because they had $30 million of landscaping contracts ready to go. You know, they always say that will catalyze public improvements. Well, they came back to us 6 months later with a new plan, and you notice the victory gardens are still there, the basketball courts are still there, because in those days, we didn't have a mafia don mayor. We had a guy who'd grown up here and actually had to look, you know, his neighbors might say something to him if he screwed us over.
Thank you so much.
No,
thank you. All right, I'm going to go to Christine Poff online.
Great, can you see me? Sorry that I can't be in there in person. My name is Christine Poff, and I live in Jamaica Plain, and I've been involved with the Franklin Park Coalition for many, many years. And I have a different perspective on this project and on the process. I've done a lot of community engagement over 30 years, 20 years with the 25 years with the Franklin Park Coalition, and I've actually never worked with the city so effectively and seen them, excuse me, be so transparent and open and willing to work with us. I feel like the White Stadium project is a much, much better project because of their willingness to hear our concerns and our worries and really make modifications for that. But in particular, because the transportation plan has come up so much, this is the first time there's been any really solid discussion around transportation in Franklin Park. And there are, if you know the park, you know that on fall weekends, there are massive cross-country races, and the entire park is covered with cars. When the zoo does a big event, the entire park is covered with cars. When we host our Playhouse in the Park concerts or our Kite Festival, the park is covered with cars. And we've never been able to really, and the action plan didn't really take it on what was needed to really manage both parking, transportation, and especially MBTA involvement. The coalition 10 and 15 years ago worked really hard to try and get the Boston Transportation Department and the MBTA in the room to try and increase transit access to the park, and we were just never successful and spent so many hours and so much time trying. So for us, this transportation plan is a start, and we hope that it's really a way to look at public transit access to the park, alternatives like shuttle buses from T stations, bike parking, and the park is so desperately in need of that. And so many of the, the zoo visitorship is at least 80% suburban. The cross country is almost exclusively suburban. And so if we can get, the Kite Festival is not, and the activities that the Franklin Park Coalition runs, and thank you for Karen for pointing them out, some of the wins that we've had, whether it's Glen Road, Karen Money product, that is Glen Road paving, or the Playhouse and the activities that we have done over the years. But we really hope that by delving and really working hard to get a transportation plan for the stadium, it will just pave the way for better transportation options to the park that are not parking in the park. We put out really strongly that we did not want cars on the playset, and there will not be cars on the playset. And part of the reason we did that is because we knew if the soccer team games parked on the playset, the zoo would jump at that opportunity. They're desperate for more parking. And we need other options, and we need the zoo to look at empty space along Blue Hill Avenue or Morton Street or down at Forest Hills. We just need better options, and we're thrilled that that with the advent of the stadium, that's all being looked at. And last, I just want to say, again, we just so appreciate the work the city has done with community members. There have been so many meetings and so much information presented, and so much openness to changing the stadium project based on people's concerns. We have not been against it blatantly. Our position as the coalition has always been, if something is managed really well, it can be in the park and it can enliven and make the park better and more positive and more used. And we're thrilled that Boston Public School students, I had kids who went through the public schools, and one of them was in the stadium a lot. And so we're thrilled to see some attention to the kids that need better athletic and other facilities. Thank you, that's all.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Sarah Friedman.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good. Thank you for this opportunity. I did submit comments by email, and I'll try not to repeat what others have said. I will live in JP, and I will disclose I'm affiliated with both Emerald Necklace Conservancy and Franklin Park Coalition. I must say, well, I'll save that for the end. There are so many environmental questions that have not been well answered, and I'm glad someone earlier pointed out the expanded building, and much has been made of taking down the fence around what they're calling the Grove, but that area is green already. And yes, it's adding access, but in terms of impacts, they're creating a whole lot of new building, and no one seems to be talking about that. The tree removal has been covered. I included in the email a slide about, I think it was Kaliga, or Kate, someone mentioned that all the new 500 trees really only replaced like 1 and a fraction mature functional, like carbon sequestration. It's really not comparable, a new tree. It's good that they're doing that, and previously they didn't have to replace park trees that were removed. Concerns I have, neighbors are very worried about traffic, to the point that when I go to JP Licks or even FedEx, I was Xeroxing a map of the Emerald Necklace, and the woman, when I went to pay for it, said, "Oh, I used to live right there." And so I asked her if she's been following the stadium project, and she said, yeah. And her one comment was, it feels like they're taking something away. And I know the city, I don't want to stand in the way of the benefits. I know the city and many residents are excited about the rent, the community benefits, the fraction of the ticket. But I liked Councilor Murphy's question at the beginning, or in the earlier part of the hearing, about the pool in Charlestown. If the city could pay for that, why is it that we don't believe, with $100 million investment, why don't we believe the city could just do it and not have to kick out football and give Saturday access to the public and not intimidate neighbors about being able to park at their own house or have company? We haven't been able to really have that conversation. And so I'll leave it with a quote from Olmsted that I don't have time to read the whole thing, but one of the more famous quotes is that parks are where people can escape the hustle and bustle of the city. And I think bringing 11,000 people in and announcers yelling goal or score, I forget what the soccer, but he holds it for about a minute, is kind of the opposite of escaping the hustle and bustle. So I hope we can find a way that works for everyone and make the best use of the city public money, taxpayer money. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sarah, and I always appreciate a good Frederick Law Olmsted quote, "Parks are the great equalizer." That's something that I use quite often, so I appreciate your perspective here. I want to acknowledge that we've been joined by Councilor Mejia. We are all set with public testimony, I believe. Okay, oh, we have one more person. I'm sorry, I don't have your name, or it's up there. If you want to start and say your name and your affiliation. Great.
Hi, my name is Bermina Sherry. I am from Mattapan. I recently graduated from Boston University with a degree in political science, and I am a former member of the Mayor's Youth Council. I was the director of the Climate Action Committee. I come to this hearing from an environmental perspective, so it's great that we are having a discussion about the environmental impacts that this project would have. In regards to this project, I've always come at it at the perspective of the environmental impacts, and particularly environmental justice. And I don't want that to be conflated with the fact that I only care about the environment, but not necessarily in conjunction with humanity. When I do come at this from an environmental perspective, it's in relation to how it will impact the human and how it will impact nature and the connection between that, because we are in some ways very disconnected to nature. As it relates to this project specifically, I find it perplexing and very concerning. Really, I'm not necessarily convinced that 80% of the trees that are being cut down, I find it very convenient that 80% of the trees that are considered unhealthy or poor or invasive are surrounding the exact perimeter that they need to expand the stadium. And I think in part that's because of what exactly the definition that is being used for invasive. Like what are we considering an invasive species? Are we considering it maples that are already around Boston, and maples that don't necessarily have an explicit impact or direct, detrimental impact on the environment in Boston, in comparison to invasives that actually do have detrimental impacts? So just that in and of itself is concerning for me, and would be based off that definition, we'd be cutting down however many trees unnecessarily, which would impact the tree canopy, which is already very limited in Boston. By admission, by the city of Boston, we already know that we have a limited tree canopy, and 50% of the tree canopy is on private property, which is something that we don't have connection to, not necessarily connection to. The city does not have jurisdiction to do anything about those trees that are on private property. When you have the ability to do something when these trees are on public property, and you get to dictate how they're managed and what we can do, how to preserve them, it's interesting that you have decided that the best option when you have these trees on your property, within your jurisdiction, you decided that the best way to manage them is to cut them down for a project and to take up 2 extra acres for a restaurant and a beer garden, when supposedly this project is supposed to be for the kids. So I think that, as has been said before, this project has not been considered in its totality in regards to what alternatives could be, potential alternatives that are genuinely within the best interest for the children, and not necessarily just for private entities and privatization. I think if we're genuinely here to provide a stadium that is state of the art for the children, we wouldn't be considering, or we would be considering alternatives that don't have to have a private entity involved. Thank you. That's all I have to say.
Thank you very much. Okay, at this point, I think we'll pass it to the lead sponsor for any closing remarks, and I guess preferred next steps about this in committee, et cetera. Councilor Murphy?
Thank you all for being here. I said a lot at the beginning and in my opening statements. City Hall is the people's building, and I think this hearing, when I did focus it specifically on the environment, but was an opportunity for people to feel heard. I think it's important, if you agree with people's opinions or not, that you hear them. And for me, I often learn and take from that. So took lots of notes, have lots of, always come away with these with new ideas, new feelings. Thank you to Chief Sweat, your team, Sam, Jill, welcome as the interim in your position now. Thank you for staying and listening, because I do think one of the things I've been hearing from the beginning in this project and other projects across the city, that we're not being listened to. So it really means a lot to the residents who are here. And when I talk to other people about this hearing, that you stayed does mean a lot. And I know sometimes people leave and Zoom in and listen remotely, but it's important that you hear and feel, right? Because I feel the emotions, I feel the concerns people have, and it's important that we allow this space to have that happen. So know that we're in the middle of it. We're nowhere near the end of anything ever. So here for continuing to be an advocate and listen, and how we can make sure if things are going to happen that we have a say, that we never give up on making sure that our handprints, right, that our feelings and our concerns are continued to be listened to. So one of the things, Chair, that did come out of it was that one of the biggest questions I think many people have that has not been addressed specifically is the traffic. And obviously we were here with the environmental team, so looking forward to, which wouldn't go into your committee, but really getting a better sense of what is the traffic plan, and if we really can handle with what the plan is now, the plan that is going to be put forward, because many of the residents are concerned about that. But thank you for being here. Thank you, Chair and Vice Chair, for hosting, and looking forward to continuing our relationship here.
Thank you so much. Open or closing statement? No, closing statement? Okay, go ahead, Julia.
Thank you, Chair. And apologies for not being here for the entire duration, but you already know where I stand on all things that deal with this particular situation. And I do appreciate my council colleague really looking at the issue of White Stadium through so many different lenses, right? It's not just contracts, it's not just, the environment, and it's not just a auditing, and it's not just an issue of civic engagement. I think when I see this process happening, I see an opportunity for us to really pause. And I really appreciate the final public hearing that I was able to hear, because as someone who grew up here in the city of Boston, right, whenever we talk about climate or environment, it feels so disconnected from people of color, because it usually feels like a conversation of privilege, right? Because we're too busy trying to put food on our table and trying to just stay alive. We don't even feel comfortable riding our bikes down the street without worrying about getting shot. So when we're talking about climate and environment, we usually forget the intersection of it all. And it always boils down to race. And that's why I'm so happy that you were here to uplift that, because what is happening in this particular scenario is that we are tapping into every piece of green that we have left in the city and occupying space, and that is taking space away from people to have refuge. And I think that this is a conversation of justice. And I will always be firm in my belief in terms of the impact that this will have, not just on the environment, but also in our social and emotional well-being, because what is happening to us is traumatic. And so for me, the posture that we're trying to find every single pathway to delay this from happening and to still see it moving full speed ahead speaks volumes to the amount of work that we still have to do. And as one of 13 city councilors, I don't want to be responsible for the historical narrative that will come as a result of this. Because many years ago, decades, it was Black, brown, poor, white folks who organized to prevent the highway from plummeting through the South End, right? They were able to make that happen. But here we are, decades later, and I feel like we're living that reality again. And that will, for us to slow it down and to stop it, feels like every day is getting further away from us. And I feel a sense of responsibility while I still have time in this chamber to utilize my voice to help support the work that so many advocates have been doing here in the name of racial, environmental justice, because that's what this is about. And I appreciate the opportunity to just say a few words because this is one of the hills that I potentially may be willing to die on, because I live in the neighborhood. I live in the neighborhood, and I want to protect the neighborhood that I grew up in. And so I think that we still have an opportunity to do just that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Mejia. I have no closing remarks. I, again, just want to express my gratitude to Councilor Weber for doing a great job in covering for me when I had a commitment in district. I think with that, I will say that this hearing on docket 0424 and 0425 is now adjourned. Thanks, everyone.